This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, welcome everyone to the Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan Update Countywide Citizen Advisory Committee. This is our meeting for March 18th, 2021. I'm Andy Davis, I'm the chair. I will call this meeting to order, and then we can quickly go around the room and I'll call out folks for quick introductions. Again, I'm Andy Davis, I'm the chair. I live in Astoria. Jim, could you introduce yourself? Allegria?
Yes, I'm Jim Allegria, and I'm on the Countywide Advisory Committee, and I live here in Astoria.
Thanks, Jim. Todd Lundy?
Hi, I'm Todd Lundy, and I am a member of the Southwest Coastal Citizens Advisory Committee and also a member of this countywide committee.
Thanks, Todd. Susanna Gladwin?
Hi, I'm from the Jewel area. Yes, I have a farm in Jewel.
Thanks,
I'm
Susanna.
here. Thanks.
Cheryl Johnson?
I am part of the Northeast CAC and then the liaison to this countywide CAC.
Thanks, Cheryl. Robert Strickland? For some reason, I don't hear you, Robert, even though it appears that you're unmuted. Nothing yet. Robert, I'm going to go on to Jan, but if we hear you piping up, I'll be happy to come back to you. Jan Mitchell?
I'm Jan Mitchell, and I live in Astoria, and I am the vice chair of the countywide group. And Robert we've not heard any sound out of him, although he's been here for probably another, 10 minutes. So I don't know what's the problem for him.
Okay. Thanks, Jan. Gail, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, Gail Hendrickson, Community Development Director.
Thanks, Gail. And I'll go around for other folks that are on the line. If you care to briefly introduce yourself, we're happy that you're here. We'd be happy to know who you are. Dan Stark. I did see you come off mute, Dan, but I don't hear you, I'm afraid. Well, let's try Commissioner Webb.
Hello, I'm Commissioner Pam Webb from District 3, and I'm just going to be lurking in the shadows for a few more minutes because I'm off to the dedication of the, what do we know? We're probably calling it the groundbreaking for the new jail. But good luck and have a good meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner. Deborah Birkby.
My name's Deborah Birkby, as you say, Andy. I live in the Southwest Coastal Planning area and past commissioner for the county.
Thank you for joining us, Deborah. And Jed Arnold.
I'm Jed Arnold. I'm the Community Outreach and Stewardship Coordinator for Hampton Family Forest based out of Napa.
Thanks for joining us, Jed. Okay, did I miss anyone? Don't see any extras. But Robert and Dan, if you care to introduce yourself at some point in the meeting or your audio starts working, just let us know. Okay, so meeting summaries. Did we have meeting summaries in this packet?
No, we did not. The county has hired a transcription service to prepare the meeting summaries, and so they'll be working through our backlog, and we're hoping that in April we'll have some meeting summaries to bring back to you for your review.
Okay, great. Thank you for the update on that, Gail. So let's move to CAC liaison reports. Clatsop Plains. Robert, are you audio with us yet? No, I don't hear you. Gail, is it possible you can give an update for Clatsop Plains?
Yes, so the Clatsop Plains group met on February 11th, and well, actually they met on March 11th, and they are discussing now Goal 6, which is air, water, and land resource quality. And so we're looking at things such as air pollution, water pollution, how land is basically protected from chemicals and runoff and pesticides and things like that. So those recommendations from that committee will be coming to you at your April meeting.
Okay, great, Gail. Thank you. LC Jewel, Susanna, do you have any update from the LC Jewel committee?
We met on the 12th of March, and actually, it was a fairly quick meeting, and I realized I'm having a little bit of trouble going back and forth and figuring out where we are in time with each report, because we're kind of out of sync. And I have some comments on water quality and a Department of Justice memorandum of understanding, which I think should be noted. And I don't know if it's appropriate right now to do it. Can I just comment on it, Gail? Or Andy?
So it's possible if the comments
Anyway,
fairly short, sure, but of course we'll be getting to that topic in a future meeting, I believe. But sure, I mean, if you want to report business out of the committee, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I'll jump in quickly then. So Oregon Department of Forestry and DEQ and Department of Justice had a meeting March 3rd, and there was this memorandum from Department of Justice that I felt it was very clear about the mandate from DEQ about what maintaining water quality, bringing distressed water up. That's not their terminology. Getting water clean again, testing for contaminants and things. I did comment officially about the need for a lot more testing, because it always comes back on water quality of testing. So this is water that's getting into streams and rivers and groundwater. And I thought, as I said, I thought it was an important memorandum, and I think the county should be supportive of it. And I wanted to comment on Pat Corcoran's comment, which will come up on the WAVE project. But maybe I'll just wait till we get to the energy part of the meeting, because I'll bring up my things on WAVE energy at that time.
Sure.
We had a lot of discussion at the last meeting about dealing with slash piles and using biomass to create energy. And I brought up, but we played with the wording a lot, and I think we should still play with it, but in this meeting, I mean, when it comes up, which I think is this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think that's all.
Okay. Gail, do you have a Lewis and Clark report for us?
Only to tell you that their last meeting was at the end of February, February 25th, I believe, and it covered the same topic that you're covering today, the energy sources and energy conservation. And
Okay.
I don't think I really have anything to report out of that committee.
Okay. It's nice that we're at least in time with them at the moment. Northeast, Cheryl, do you have a report from Northeast?
We also met on March 11th, and we also went over Goal 6, air, water, land, and land resource quality. Issues that came up that were important and discussable for us, recycling. We continue to call out for additional need for recycling over here in our community in the Northeast. We're very grateful to have recycling every weekend instead of every other weekend, but hoping that in the future that can expand. We talk about septic tanks. It turns out that 5 of the 5 people on the Northeast CAC indeed have septic tanks. This is an issue for us. Discussed the need for funding to repair or replace, which is an issue that the county had suggested. We were also interested in organic waste disposal and a need for that across the county. And at the local level, houseboats was an issue that was addressed in our Northeast local CAC, and the county had suggested limited expansion, and there was a brief discussion on that, and we were in support of that. I wanted to briefly say that there is a bill in the legislature now, HB 2488, and that bill is to add a goal to this land use plan. It would be goal 20, and it would specifically address climate change. It's currently in committee, so it's not on the floor. They're not voting on it yet. They had one hearing. I submitted testimony, and the next hearing is coming up March 22nd. And again, that's in committee, so it's not on the floor. They're not voting on it. So instead of 19 goals, we would have 20 goals, but I'm in support of it. And I just wanted to say to Robert, is it possible for Robert to phone in so that we can hear him? I hate to have him there, but not be able to hear him. And that's it from Northeast.
No, we still don't hear you, Robert. Sorry. Thank you, Cheryl, for the report. And last but not least, Southwest Coastal. Todd, do you have a report out from Southwest Coastal?
Yes, we met on the 10th of March, 2-hour meeting. Topics are the same as the others. That is the quality of air, water, and land resources. And all of our committee members were present, and the comprehensive planning staff were all present. And I'm thinking that perhaps a headset on would work for the Northeast County representative. I thought he had one in the past.
For Robert, you mean? Yeah, that might be possible, or like Cheryl said, hopefully he might be able to call us. That would be good to hear him. Okay, thank you for your report, Todd. At this time, we have a space where we invite public comment and input. We would ask that generally public comment and input be germane to today's topic, but if there are things germane to other goals in the comprehensive plan, we welcome that too, and maybe we can cover them in a different session. Is there public comment at this time? Okay, seeing no public comment, we will move on to the next section. There is another section for public comment at the end of the session today. So if you want to speak up, you're welcome to then as well. I'll also say, Cheryl, if you didn't see it, Robert just asked a question in chat about the Northeast houseboat issue. Okay, so our main task today is the review of Goal 5 and 13 on energy sources and energy conservation. Gail, do you want to tee this up at all? Is there information that you need to share with us before we get started on our normal flow of work here?
Sure. So today we're going to be looking actually at two separate goals. We'll be wrapping up our initial discussion of Goal 5 by looking at energy sources, and then we'll also be reviewing Goal 13, which deals with energy conservation and basically how we protect those resources and conserve them for future use by future generations. So a lot of the background materials in your report give you the foundation for this, but there were some interesting items that came out of Goal 13 that were in the background report that some of us may not be familiar with. So, for example, one of the items that was discussed way back in 1975 was a study that was done that identified a site out in Brownsmead, a 400-acre site for a nuclear power plant. So that was one of the interesting things that we found. There was an expectation that wood would become the predominant fuel source within the county, and that wind turbines would really not be that productive in terms of providing energy resources for the county, that they might be useful for electrical needs for small islands, but not for inland populations. And then again, looking at wind resources, there were six or seven sites that were identified back in 1983. There was a Department of Energy study that was done, and they identified 6 sites within the county for potential wind turbines generation facilities. Interestingly, none of those ever came to fruition, but we have recently approved a test tower out on Nikolai Ridge for a possible facility out there. And I believe that tower is either in the process of being installed, or it might be completely installed by now. Looking ahead to solar back in 1980 was predicted to be much more in use than it is currently. They were predicting a much larger scale of solar production by the year 2000, and here we are 21 years later, and it's still, at least in this part of the this part of the state, not that widely used. So as we're looking forward, what you'll be concentrating on, there are 2 worksheets that we'll be focusing on today, going through our existing policies that are on the books and making changes to those or eliminating them as needed. And then we'll be looking at the new issues and trends that we can see right now in time that will be occurring over the next 20 years and working to develop policies to address those. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions from the group for Gail at this time? Susanna?
Cross-laminate lumber is mentioned. Did I just see it here? I can't scroll through, but I thought here, and I know that it's, as a wood product, I was puzzled why it was included. And I also want to comment on burning wood. It is common out in the country, but if you are upwind from somebody with a wood stove, it's often quite distressing if it gets into your house. I mean, there's a lot of wood particle. It's, to me, not the ideal solution. And just the whole issue of the how to deal with wood waste, I think needs to, I wanted to see the wording that it be studied in an environmental way, but I think we'll come up to that later. And then the other thing was the report was, to me, kind of dismissive of wave energy, which is finally, after I don't know how many years, 8, 10 years, I know when it first came before the county, that it never really was pursued in Clatsop County. But I sent to Gail to ask her to send around to everybody about what's happening in Newport. And is it okay now that I comment on Pat Corcoran or later? He commented and I want to comment on.
I'm not sure if his comment on wave, I'm not sure if it was linked to any particular policy. But I might say that we could hold the comment until there's a section in proposed policies that at least speaks to that a little bit. We can make the comment then. That might be the best place for it.
Okay.
Thanks, Susanna. Any other comments from the group on the background materials or questions for Gail before we get started? Jan?
This is just a comment. I think I read through that, and the policy and so on that we're considering are pretty not a lot of changes proposed, but I think we're really at a point where the biggest comment we need to make is this section of the comprehensive plan should not wait another 40 years to be updated. We should be maybe doing it every 5 to 10 years because change is happening pretty rapidly, both with climate and with our energy systems. So we need to be on top of it. That's all.
Thank you, Jan. Any other comments or questions from the group? Robert? Robert, can you hear me? I still cannot hear you. Okay. Jim Allegria.
The only thing I'd like to say is reading through the policies, I think it points to a danger of sorts when you start to name specific, say, natural resource sources, because technology changes, cost efficiency changes. I would suggest, instead of having specific ones named, that we use something a little more generic, like renewable resources in lieu of specific types of renewable resources. That way there, like, Susanna mentioned about wave energy that's coming on board. Wind turbines was not thought to be very practical. Well, the cost efficiencies have changed dramatically. So if we think about this a little more generically, then we don't have to worry about these smaller changes going on, and the comprehensive plan will still be very pertinent. That's it.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, I don't see any other hands up, and I think pretty much everyone has spoken that I would expect anyway. So I guess we can go on and move through. I think the first action item is the review of the inventoried energy sources, which is on page 6 of my PDF packet. Is there anyone, or was there any feedback from the subgroups about the resource inventory here, additions, deletions, changes to that inventory? Gail, did we get feedback from any of the groups about changes to the inventory?
There was some feedback about removing the nuclear power facility site.
Mm-hmm.
And then just for clarification, when we get to goal 19, which deals with the offshore territorial waters, then we'll be getting into a deeper discussion about wave technology at that time. There's very little control that we will have over the siting of those types of facilities because they will be outside of our jurisdiction when they're offshore like that. But it was not meant to be dismissive in this particular discussion today. It was just something that we'll be addressing later on.
Gail, for clarification, can you inform us of how far the jurisdiction of the county actually goes out into the water?
You know, I'm not 100% sure. I think it's 3 miles, but I
Okay.
would want to double check that.
Okay, thank you. Susanna?
The way it would possibly affect the county is, I mean, in permitting and things, is that there's infrastructure on land. When the undersea cables bringing in the electricity come on land, and also what in the Scottish Isles, Orkney Islands in Scotland are doing, because they have things in place operating right now. They take, when there is surplus electricity, they create hydrogen with it. So I see if we can get into wave energy, that hydrogen, and for a lot of ways, hydrogen may also be an energy source for the future. And one bit of information I got is that 15% of the gas mixture in the gas pipelines already existing can be hydrogen. When it gets over 15%, it can start damaging seals, I think, is the problem with more than 15%. So I also would like to see hydrogen in there.
Okay, thank you, Susanna. Actually, Gail, Susanna's.
I'm sorry. Andy, I don't hear you. Are we waiting on?
Well, I thought you were going to make more comments, so I was letting you go there.
Yes, I was. The comment on the nuclear is that there is a push, I think, from Bill Gates to be doing small nuclear around. And I know there was something before Oregon Congress to have small nuclear, and there were a lot of proponents at the hearing. The trouble is in a bad earthquake, we would have no idea, with a lot of things being broken down on communications for a while, as to how dangerous a small nuclear facility might be at that time. I think there's so many issues with nuclear that it is not something I would want to see in the county. That's my comment. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Susanna. Cheryl, I see that you've come off mute. Did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, thank you. Gail referred to the nuclear in the inventory, and it is the recommendation of Northeast CAC to remove that. And it was part of our local plan. And so when we get there, it is our recommendation to remove it.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, Cheryl. So one of the things Susanna brought up that I have a question about, Gail, that I'm unfamiliar with the answer for, is she mentioned something like hydrogen as essentially an energy storage technology. Obviously, things like even battery energy storage are becoming bigger aspects of our technology landscape. Is there any portion of the comprehensive plan goal set that best fits or that currently contains things like energy storage or speaks to that issue?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the technology was like when this was drafted, if that technology existed or how well developed it might have been. There are several committees that did go down that path about electrical vehicle charging stations being able to take the energy off your vehicle to power your house in case of an emergency. So there were, and I think Clatsop County Clatsop Plains Northeast, and there may have been another one that talked about this. So the place to put it would be in table 2, where we're talking about new technologies, issues that we want to deal with over the next 20 years.
Do you know, as an extension of the question, do you know where that should live in the comprehensive plan document? Should that be part of goal 5 as a source, goal 13 as a way of conserving energy? That was sort of the root of my question. Should it be economic development? You know, like where should we cite things like that?
You can sprinkle recommendations that are related to the same topic throughout different goals to help reinforce what you want to do. So you may want to put something into the goal 5. I don't know if you'd want to count it necessarily as a resource because people buy and sell cars all the time. I don't know how you would go about protecting it because it's not really tied to land use. But perhaps in goal 13, where you're talking about conservation, or you could look at goal 7, where you're looking at natural hazard mitigation and how to, create resiliency is another place to put it. I don't know enough about the technology to know what you can do with it in terms of storing and selling and, helping to power outside uses outside of your own particular property or home. So I'm not really able to say how much of an economic development tool it might be, but that could be a possibility.
Okay. Thank you for trying to answer that anyway. Robert, I know that you dropped off and came back. Do you want to test your sound?
Just a test.
We do hear you. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. I'm glad that you're back. Okay. So are there any other additions, changes, comments about the resource inventory before we move on into the policies? If Susanna, and then Todd.
Yes. One of the big developments on trucks right now, Toyota, I don't know about other manufacturers, are developing hydrogen-powered trucks because electric trucks are the big batteries are problematic. And so there seems to be one of the big pushes for hydrogen, and that could be part of our transportation goal in the future. I'd like to see that discussed at that time.
Okay, noted.
And just one quick comment. I don't know when, and let me just get it out of the way. Pat Corcoran had said that the wave machines would be possibly jeopardized in a tsunami. And I asked, I think it's Don Henlon, who's the, I want to say project manager of the PAC-WAVE, PAC wave out of OSU, that's doing the wave energy project that's permitted and now in place and going forward this year. He said that they're out, I think it's 7-8 miles, where the tsunami wave is moving fast, but it's very small. It's when it hits the shelf and builds up that it creates all the problems, and the wave energy machines will be out past that.
Okay,
That's
thank you, Susanna. Todd, I saw you came off mute. Did you have comment for the inventory?
Yeah, with regard to nuclear power, I think that it's premature for any of us who don't know the technology and aren't engineers to preclude its safety. We've learned a lot about nuclear power and how to make it safe over these years, and I don't think making it something that's not permissible in the county would be foolish. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Okay, let's try then let's move into the policies. I think essentially everyone on the committee has spoken at this point, so let's move into policies and go to goal 5, energy sources policies. And for clarification, I just want to note that I think goal 5 is listed twice on page 7 and page 8, but I believe page 8 in my packet should in fact be goal 13, energy sources policies. So we're on the first page of the red table. So goal 5, energy sources policies. I'll read the policy and the staff comment, and I'll read them off in case anyone is just listening. Goal 5, energy sources policies. Policy 1, development shall not be allowed to impair the feasibility of potential wind generating facilities at sites identified as appropriate for such generation. The staff comment is in 1983, the Oregon Department of Energy completed a survey or study, excuse me, that identified 6 potential wind generation sites in Clatsop County: Clatsop Spit, Columbia River Jetty, Fort Stevens, Astoria Weather Bureau, Astoria WBAB, the Port of Astoria Airport, and Wickiup Bridge. Sites 1 through 3 and 6 have limited or low development potential. Staff was not able to identify the location of Site 4, that's the Astoria Weather Bureau. Site 5 is within the incorporated limits of the city of Warrenton. Ensuring that sites are available for future development or renewable wind energy facilities continues to remain a priority, and overall the staff recommendation is to retain the policy. There's a variety of feedback from the different CACs, so I might go through and ask if any of the CACs would like to delve into their comments at this time. CAC liaisons, anyone want to speak up to this particular energy source policy? Susanna.
I just would make a comment that, yeah, I mean, the trouble for Clatsop County is trees are a big deal in this county, and our fir trees get really big. And I think that wind energy is problematic because of that. I agree with Clatsop Spit, especially with a potential bad earthquake and tsunami coming someday. I wouldn't want to depend too much. And, you know, I agree with Don. There's a lot of issues about Clatsop Spit aside from the heritage site for Native Americans. That's all.
Okay. Any other of the CACs want to make a comment at this time from the work of your committee? And or does anyone want to, so there are sort of proposals here about the specific use cases especially, or things that we should be aware of. Are there any motions to amend the existing language or a motion to support staff recommendation and retain the policy as is? It would be appropriate to make either one of those at this time too.
I move to retain the policy and amend. Oh, may I speak? Sorry,
sure,
I jumped in.
Yeah.
I move to retain the policy and adopt the changes recommended by.
I second.
That was just to make sure, that was motion to retain the policy and adopt changes recommended by staff, Todd, which I don't know that I see any changes recommended by staff. Okay, so so the motion effectively would be a motion.
County should.
It would be a motion to retain policy 1, and I've got a second from Jan. Is there a discussion of that motion? I have a hand from Jim and Robert. Jim, and then Susanna.
The only thing that concerns me is the wording "as sites identified as appropriate," and then you have staff comments that has specific areas as noted in the 1983 document. I don't think it's wise to have specific locations as in the 1983 document because technology changes. So I fully support policy 1, but that I am concerned with at sites identified as appropriate who actually identifies that as appropriate. Like I mentioned, I'm not for specific sites. If it's for the states, they have air sheds as such mapped out in terms of whether they're more foreseeable areas. I could see tying the policy to some kind of a statewide assessment of feasible areas. I'm also in favor if you want to put some kind of side guards in terms of how close to residential areas do you want a large turbine. I think that's something that we can explore. So in general, I am for the policy. I am concerned with the specific languages as sites identified. That's it.
Gail, could I ask you maybe 2 points of clarity here? One, I'm understanding staff comment here as just background material, not necessarily that in any way that Department of Energy list was connected or binding to policy 1. So that would be my first question. Is that a correct assumption there?
I don't know if it's correct or not, Andy. I know that the study was done that identified the 6 sites. I have not looked, so I don't know if there was an ordinance that specifically adopted them as these sites identified.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that. I know that at this point in time, the only place that we have a site for potential generation is the testing tower that's being installed up on Nikolai Ridge.
Okay, and then I guess my follow-up question, you may have partially answered there, but what is the criteria that staff is currently using, if you know it, for identifying sites as appropriate?
Yeah, staff does not identify sites as appropriate or inappropriate. First of all, we've only had the one tower come in, which is the one that's being installed on Nikolai Ridge. Second of all, we as staff don't have the technical knowledge to make a determination like that. We certainly aren't putting up testing towers such as the one that's going in on Nikolai Ridge. We would rely on Department of Energy if we were to look at something that would be appropriate for wind generation in terms of actual production. In terms of land use, I mean, obviously what we would look at would be proximity to surrounding development. Most of it's going to be residential where we're probably going to see that, but there could be impacts on commercial or industrial development. We would look at things as with regard to how it would potentially conflict with our big game habitats. But ultimately, other than through our zoning ordinance where we either allow it as some type of conditional use or a zone where it's not allowed at all, we will have very little input about that location. It's really going to be, we're going to rely on Department of Energy.
Okay, fair answer. Thank you, Gail. So I've got Robert and Susanna. Robert?
I feel dreadfully ignorant on a topic that should seem like it has obvious answers. You know, I'm down here on sunny Clatsop Plains with the wonderful ocean breezes that you know, sparsely settled, you know, plenty of eagles flying over. I don't have a set understanding on this. My hunch is that the elk aren't going to be bothered by the turbine. I don't know how the decibel level of a turbine compares with Highway 101 going through here. Or Camp Riley is going boom boom. I would love to see a kind of competing analysis of pros and cons, because I really don't have a clear bias. We used to have a windmill here, but it worked so well it self-destructed. And so you know, the idea of what's appropriate I am all ears to people of every political persuasion who proclaim what I should think, because I'm not clear. It certainly seems that there's a good kite flying area, which would seem to be a great wind turbine area, and I feel less ready to write off wind turbines in ignorance than thinking I know something about small scale nuclear. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And Susanna, actually, you were in queue.
Yes, on the comments from our group meeting, LC Jewel Seaside Rural, that we did not want to see wind turbines on Onion Peak because of the incredibly unique nature of Onion Peak, and that Saddle Mountain is important. I think the county needs to really stake out those areas not to have turbines. Saddle Mountain, both because of the Native American heritage, all their stories, it was very important to them, as well as it's one of the big visuals that the county has from almost every part of the county. And a state park, lots of reasons not to have it on Saddle Mountain. When we discussed it in our group, the bird kill of turbines was brought up, and as I researched it, it's also bats. Purple is the best color to not attract bugs for bats and birds. So if we have them, they should be purple, which I thought was kind of cute. And with climate change and needing power generation, I think everything that's reasonable should be on the table. I just got so excited over the wave energy and the potential. The other thing is that wind is intermittent, sun is intermittent, while the wave energy is much more steady. So I did send her on some emails, Robert, that Gail forwarded on for me on the protecting bats and birds and on the wave energy.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. Gail, question for you here, just maybe part of Susanna and Robert's comment. So this section of goal 5 anyway, where we're considering energy sources, is very much it seems concerned to me with the development either of energy sources or of other development projects that might interfere with energy sources. Not so much in the content of the current policies explicit to wildlife interaction. Of course, we have a different section of goal 5, which is more concerned with wildlife resources. Do you think it's necessary for us to spell out interactions between energy and wildlife resources, or do the sections that already deal with wildlife, are they sufficient to handle if someone wants to put in a wind turbine and citizens are concerned about the impact on wildlife? Would the other parts of goal 5 sufficiently handle that?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and review the wildlife habitat resources policies, Andy. Unfortunately, they've all kind of blurred together in my head, and I can't pull them out right now and tell you yes or no. With regard, though, to our specific policy that we're looking at right now, policy 1, it's really focused on the question. Well, it's not even a question; it's a statement. It's focused on the statement that when we have identified sites, then we should not be letting development encroach into those areas, and potentially eliminating those sites. If you read the recommendation from the Lewis and Clark CAC, I think they had a very good recommendation, which was that we should be working with the Department of Energy to see if we can get an updated study that would help us identify those wind generation sites and reassess the sites that were, I say are current, but the ones identified in 1983. And I think that's actually a very good recommendation.
Okay. For clarification, do you think that's a good recommendation as far as updated policy language or just action upon staff?
I think it's a future action that we put in there, and I've actually moved it over to your table, next table that you'll be looking at. But I think we do need to get that study updated. But I think by leaving the policy as currently written and including a new policy that says we're going to update that list of sites, I think that would perhaps address some of Jim's concerns.
Okay, thank you. So what we've got on the table right now is a motion to retain policy 1 as written. Is there any further discussion of that motion to retain policy 1? Susanna.
Yes. Deborah Burkby commented in chat that the NCLC is working on purchasing Onion Peak, and there'll probably be and it should be a conservation easement. When the policy 1 says development shall not be allowed to impact the feasibility of wind generation, could that be construed as development? Or could the more state park development of Saddle Mountain be construed as an impairment of the feasibility of wind generating? That's my question to Gail.
So I would say, Susanna, that if we are working on the assumption that the 1983 sites that were identified are the identified sites that we're aware of at this point, Saddle Mountain was not one of those, nor was Onion Peak. So I don't know that we would consider any development in those areas as encroaching on wind generation. In fact, we recently approved a new, actually I think it was in addition to a cell tower at Saddle Mountain, and we did not deny it because it could potentially impact wind generation, just because wind generation wasn't considered for that site.
Gail, can I maybe ask a generalized follow-up question that from Susanna's comment, which is, do uses such as conservation require any approval from the county? In that, would the county disapprove conservation development because it stopped people from creating wind generation sites?
It would depend. Well, let me split my answer apart. So
Sure.
when you say conservation, I'm not sure if you're talking about conservation as in I'm tearing down a dike and restoring a wetland, or are you talking conservation? I bought a piece of property and I'm just going to let it sit there and do its property thing and just be natural. So if you're just buying a piece of property and you're just letting it sit there, there are no permits required for that. We certainly don't require approval or somebody come in and obtain approval for that. If you're looking to do a restoration project that would require permitting, then yes, staff would review it. I can't think of a scenario, and as soon as I say this, the application is coming in the door now that I haven't thought of, but where somebody had a piece of property where they were, I'd have to see, I guess I'd say I would have to see what the proposal was.
Okay.
So yeah, it's too hypothetical for me to answer.
Okay, that's a fair answer. Okay, so I see a comment from Cheryl. Sorry, I'll try to keep up with chat too. Any other comments on the motion to retain policy 1? If not, is there any objection to us to the motion to retain policy 1? Any objection to that motion? Okay, so seeing no, Susanna, is that an objection?
Yes, I think it could be better worded. I think it's very vague wording that could go.
Wait,
I could
objection.
parse
Well, hold
lots of
up, hold up.
Oh, yes.
Objection noted. We'll go to
Yes.
a voice vote. So I'll just go around the table. Jim Allegria, how do you vote on the motion to retain policy 1?
Yay.
Todd Lundy, how do you vote?
Aye.
Susanna Gladwin, how do you vote?
No.
Robert Strickland, how do you vote?
Aye.
Cheryl Johnson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jan Mitchell, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, by a count of 5-1, the motion passes to retain policy 1 as written. So we'll move on to policy 2. Policy 2 states the county will rely on state and federal permitting processes to govern the location of low-head hydro projects and to resolve any conflicts that may result from such projects. Staff comment states that low-flow hydro facilities are small dams, sometimes up to 2 feet in height, that are used in streams or ditches to generate electricity. They can act as a barrier to fish passage. Concerns have been raised by the Clatsop Chinook in previous meetings about the use of low-head hydro projects. If such projects were to occur in Clatsop County, state and possibly federal permitting requirements would apply. As Clatsop County staff does not have the expertise to independently review the technical and/or environmental aspects of such projects, staff would rely on state and/or local and/or federal agencies should conflicts arise. So staff recommendation overall is to retain the policy. Looking through the CAC comments, Susanna, do you care? Mostly it seems to support staff recommendation. Elsie Jewell has a somewhat larger comment. Susanna, would you care to explain Elsie Jewell's comment about local watershed councils and stakeholder groups?
Well, there's, other than the small height of the hydros, I mean the low head hydro, which I'm assuming is about just 2 feet. I would like clarification on that. But there are other things, a Pelton wheel, and there are other ways that you can divert water without a dam for hydro. And I think that was what that comment was all about.
Okay. So I can open it to the floor. Is there a motion to either support staff recommendation to retain the policy or to amend the existing language? I would look for a motion on either of those fronts. Jim Allegria.
Well, my motion is to slightly tweak the resolution to say essentially the same thing, but above fish-bearing and non-fish-bearing streams. And I think that would accommodate, address most of the concerns here.
Jim, could you clarify where you want to insert that language and restate it for us?
Okay. The county will rely on state and federal permitting processes to govern the locations of low-head hydro projects in non-fish bearing streams and to resolve any conflicts that may result from such projects.
Okay, in non-fish bearing streams. So Jim has moved that we retain policy 2 and insert the words in non-fish bearing streams after the word projects. Is there a second for Jim's motion?
I
I'll
second.
second.
Okay, so I got Jan for the second. So let's discuss that motion. Jim, you made the motion. Do you care to speak to why you would like to include in non-fish bearing streams?
Yeah, sure. Generally, I have nothing against, and I think it's good to have more renewable energy, such as low-head hydro projects. But to address concerns about migrating fish, I think having that exclusion would help eliminate the potential conflict. Now, the state may have some additional. I guess that the only concern, and maybe Gail could address this, is the migratory nature of fish would fall under the purview of say NOAA or ODF and W. The non-fish bearing fish, and excuse me, the non-andromenous fish are the only things that I'm not too sure if this would have an impact on.
Okay, thank you, Jim. I see a hand up from Gail, so I'd like to let her clarify things or comment.
Okay, so the language that's been proposed as part of the amendment does not prohibit a low-head hydro project in a fish-bearing stream. What the proposed language would do would say basically that the only time the county could go and rely on state and federal permitting and knowledge would be is if the low-head hydro is in a non-fish bearing stream. So you haven't created a prohibition, you've just narrowed the scope of when staff can rely on state expertise.
That was my point.
Thank you, Gail. So, other comment from the group on this, Susanna?
I'm sorry, but I realized when I was commenting from the LC Jewell area, I looked down and I realized that our comment actually was bringing local watershed councils and established groups under our comments included on all county public. I'm sorry, my eyesight's not so good. Public policy. We also discussed what I had mentioned earlier, but I don't know if it's appropriate to put in there other stakeholders such as the watershed councils and established groups.
Okay, so the way I'd like to handle that is, so Jim's essentially made an amendment motion to insert this language here, so I want to deal with that. If you want to make a motion to insert language around local watershed councils and stakeholder groups, let's handle that after we do this language bit from Jim. Okay.
Yes.
Any other comments on the insertion of in non-fish bearing streams?
Yeah, I do.
Todd?
Yeah, I normally would think, I support most of Jim's ideas, but this one I don't. It seems to me that what we're saying is that the county will rely on state and federal permitting processes to govern the location of low-head hydro projects in non-fish bearing streams. That leaves us, it's basically Gail's point, that leaves us with no need to have federal or state processes involved with other streams. And it seems to me it's better just left as it is, so that it applies to both fish bearing and non-fish bearing. That way that would be determined at the time whether that's a fish bearing stream, and the impact would be evaluated by people that know what they're doing. That's
Okay,
all.
thank you, Todd. Is there other comment for the group, or are we ready to go to a vote on this proposed language? Jim?
Gail and Todd brings up a good point. That was not my intention. So I know we need to vote on it. My suggestion is we defeat the motion, my motion.
Okay, thank you, Jim. So let's go to a vote. I sense there will be opposition, so we'll just go straight to a voice vote. On the motion to insert the words "in non-fish bearing streams," how do you vote, Jim Allegria?
Nay.
Okay, Todd Lundy?
No.
Susanna Gladwin?
Yes.
Robert Strickland?
Nay.
Cheryl Johnson?
No,
Jan Mitchell?
No.
Okay, by a vote of 1 to 5, the motion is defeated. So we're back to an open table at the moment. Would anyone else like to make a motion either to retain policy 2 or to amend the language? Susanna?
The comments under my group to be inserted that local watershed councils and stakeholder groups shall be included on all county public notices for proposed projects.
Can I
To be that language.
can I make a clarity suggestion here, that we just say for proposed low-head hydro projects? I just don't want this to expand to all proposed projects, and this is a specific to low-head hydro. Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Oh, yes.
Susanna?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I thought it would read. Yes.
I just want to make sure that that's clear in the, okay, so we've got a proposed insertion. To be clear, is this after the existing policy 2 and to retain the rest of policy 2, Susanna?
Oh, yes, to retain policy 2. But when it's when the permitting process is happening, that my understanding, the wording would be is that stakeholder groups would be informed.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying there. So
does that, let me just ask Gail, does that make sense?
Yes, it does, Susanna.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion is to insert after the existing policy the wording "local watershed councils and stakeholder groups shall be included on all county public notices for proposed low-head hydro projects." Is there a second for that motion?
second.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. So is there discussion of that motion? Susanna, do you want to speak to that, or do you want to let other folks discuss?
I think it's fairly self-apparent. If it's not, let other people comment.
Okay. Cheryl?
I just wanted to check with Gail. Does stakeholder groups, does that work for you, or is that too amorphous and it makes a mess for you? I am in favor of notifying local watershed councils, so I would just like clarification on stakeholder groups.
Yeah, stakeholder groups could be a little amorphous. I don't know how we could tighten it up other than just taking it out. And I think really, Susanna, if I remember correctly, the discussion at the Elsie Jewell meeting was really the concern about having the watershed councils put on notice when these types of projects were proposed. Is that correct?
Boy, my poor shrinking brain, I can't say for sure, Gail. The watershed council's a big deal.
So Cheryl, I go for it.
Andy, is it possible for us to simply, with Susanna's blessing, to simply leave out and stakeholder groups without having to amend the amendment, without having to go through that torturous process?
So we can probably try to make it less torturous, but if you just make if you make a motion, we can try to do a tertiary amendment without discussion and see if we can get unanimous consent for it. So if you want to move the language change, we'll try that.
Okay, so Andy, what I should do now is to make a motion to change the language on her amendment. Is that where we are in the process?
Yeah, I would say just make a motion to delete and stakeholder groups.
I move that we delete and stakeholder groups.
Is there a second for that motion?
A second.
Okay, Jan seconded. Is there objection to the deletion of and stakeholder groups? Is there objection to that? Susanna, is that an objection?
I'd like some clarification. Well, I want clarification. I'm thinking that the stakeholder groups would be Fish and Wildlife, Clatsop Soil and Water, which the watershed councils would probably get them in the loop, but Fish and Wildlife and some of those groups. But in the permitting process from state and federal, would they be in the loop anyway? Gail?
Yeah, state and federal, we would not send them a public notice because they're going to be having their own permitting process at that point. We already include Fish and Wildlife and Soil and Water Conservation Districts on all of our public notices.
Okay, yes, just wanted to clarify that. Andy, where are we in the process?
So
I can move to say we vote.
No, so we're in the process of a vote now. We had a point of information from you from Gail, but I'll check again. Is there objection to the deletion of the wording and stakeholder groups? Is there any objection to deleting that wording? Okay, so hearing no objection, we can take and stakeholder groups out. So we're back to the motion to include the wording or to add the wording, local watershed councils shall be included on all county public notices for proposed lowhead hydro projects. Is there any further discussion on that motion to include that language? Okay, not seeing or hearing further discussion on that motion. And Todd, I'll just let you know, just in case you don't, at least for me, your picture is frozen, so I won't necessarily see a hand if it goes up, but feel free to just tell me if you need to talk. Okay, so let's go to a vote on this one. So the motion is to insert the language, local watershed councils shall be included on all county public notices for proposed lowhead hydro projects. I'll just go to a voice vote on this. Jim Allegria, how do you vote on including the proposed language?
Yes.
Okay, Todd Lundy, how do you vote? I think you went to mute, Todd. Can you repeat your vote, Todd?
Yes.
Thank you. Susanna Gladwin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Robert Strickland, how do you vote?
Aye.
Cheryl Johnson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jan Mitchell, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, by a vote of 6-0, the language is inserted. So we're back to policy 2 as a whole. Is there a motion from the floor to either amend the language or to retain the policy as amended? Susanna?
Would you state, yeah, just state where we're at? I'm not,
So right now we've got sort of an open table. We're still working on policy 2. So what I would be looking for here is either a motion from the floor to retain policy 2 as we've amended it, or to make further amendments to the policy. Is that clear, Susanna?
yeah, so just what would be inserted is the local watershed councils would be included.
Yeah, we have
public
inserted that,
notices.
so it would be considered part of the amended language
Yes.
now.
Okay,
Cheryl,
gotcha.
I see you've got a hand up.
Motion to pass policy 2 as amended.
Second.
Thank you. I've got a motion and a second to pass policy 2 as amended. Is there discussion of that motion? Okay, not seeing or hearing any discussion. Let's go to a vote on that. I will ask, is there any objection to retaining policy 2 as amended? Any objection to retaining policy 2 as amended? Okay, seeing and hearing no objection, we can retain policy 2 as amended. Thank you all. So on to policy 3. Policy 3 states, Clatsop County shall apply the Goal 5 administrative rule to oil, gas, nuclear, and large-scale hydro that are proposed in the future. The staff comment is, the Goal 5 administrative rule would apply to any resource that is to be added to the comprehensive plan inventory. While it may be redundant to require the county to do something that it is already required to do, it re-emphasizes the process and provides clarity for the applicant and the public as to how applications will be processed and reviewed. So staff recommendation is to retain the policy. All of the local CACs supported staff recommendation. In cases like these, what I like to do is I will take that as a motion from committee. In this case, I'll say Clatsop Plains has moved that we retain policy 3 as written. Is there any discussion of the motion to retain policy 3 as written?
Yeah.
Todd?
We want to add geothermal to the list. So it's a rule: oil, gas, nuclear, geothermal, and large-scale hydro.
Thank you, Todd. I skipped over that with my eyes when I was skimming and didn't notice that you had your geothermal comment, but that is appropriate. So can you, Gail, you were going to insert the language there. So we've got a motion to insert the word geothermal into the list between nuclear and large-scale hydro. Is there a second for the motion to insert geothermal? Robert, I saw a hand there. I'll take that as a second. Any discussion of the addition of geothermal to policy 3? Todd, do you care to speak to that, or do you just want to let it stand?
It stands by itself. It may
Okay.
not be practical to have any, but to list it is a good thing to have covered.
Sure. Okay. I'm not seeing any discussion rolling up here. So is there any objection to the insertion of geothermal? Any objection to that insertion? Okay, then without objection, geothermal is accepted. So now we're back to a motion for policy 3 to retain the policy as amended. Any discussion on that motion to retain the policy as amended? Okay, I'm not seeing any discussion here. So let's see, is there any objection to retaining policy 3 as amended. Any objection to that retention? Okay, so seeing none, by unanimous consent, we will retain policy 3 as amended. Thank you all. So we'll move on to policy 4. Policy 4 reads, if and when the city of Astoria intends on constructing a hydroelectric facility at the Youngs River Falls site, Clatsop County shall, in cooperation with the city of Astoria, apply the Goal 5 administrative rule. Staff comment is per Nathan Crater, the city engineer for the city of Astoria. The Bear Creek watershed is expected to handle the needs of Astoria for the foreseeable future. Using Youngs River Falls is not an option at this point in time. There may possibly be a reason in the future to release those water rights, but that would likely only happen if a regional group was formed to resolve a regional problem. Staff recommendation is that although the project is not imminent, staff would recommend retaining this policy. So we've got comment from Clatsop Plains about traditional use of the falls for fishing by the Clatsop Chinook. Northeast echoes Clatsop Chinook concerns about hydropower in the county. Is there any motion from the floor to retain or to amend either from those committees to change the language here?
I'll make a motion.
Todd?
I move to retain the policy. It seems to do no harm. It doesn't do much good either, but it doesn't do any harm.
Okay, so I've got a motion from Todd to retain policy 4. Is there a second for that motion?
I get it.
Thank you, Jan. So I've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion or amendment for the retention of policy 4? Susanna?
Well, I'm just curious, not being in my area, about are people more knowledgeable about all the pros and cons and any history of this project of hydro at Youngs River Falls? Nobody can
Yeah.
comment. Okay.
As already stated, the city has no intention of using this because they think their Bear Creek watershed is going to be sufficient to everything they can imagine. However, they're leaving it just in case, and as Andy said, the city feels that if there were ever such circumstances that warranted that it would have to go through it'd have to be formed a regional water group to implement it and to discuss it. So that's about as much as they can say.
Robert?
Only thing I've ever heard is no way in hell is there going to be a dam put there, but the out of a penstock, comes up, but no one anticipates that ever occurring. Yes, you have a drop in where the water is above the falls and how far it goes to go below the falls. Yes, theoretically, there's room to gain something, but it's more people not wanting to give up their water rights.
Thank you, Robert. Cheryl, did you have a comment as well?
Yeah, I would like to believe that if there was a possible reason to release those water rights, it would only happen if there was a regional group formed. I would like to believe that the regional group formed would include the Clatsop Chinook. And if Gail or anyone thinks that we need to add that, we can. Otherwise, I'm content to move on.
Gail, do you have comment on that topic?
I can see I can understand why Cheryl would want to make an addition like we just did with the watershed councils. I'm trying to think about this in my head, how this is going to play out. So, I mean, we would send the public notice because it's an unincorporated county. This is a little bit different in that it also involves another jurisdiction, but I don't necessarily see the harm in including an amendment like we did with the watershed councils for the previous policy.
An amendment to indicate notification. Is that a? Am I
Correct, like we
hearing that
did
correctly?
on policy 2. The other alternative to maybe make it a little bit more broad would be if we put it on our worksheet for the new issues. I would I would recommend that maybe we put this as a policy in goal 2, which is, or goal 1, citizen involvement, which just says that as part of our normal process, we should be notifying the Clatsop Chinook or the Chinook Indian Nation on projects moving forward, period.
Cheryl, would that be sufficient for your needs if we added that as a new policy?
Yeah, and we just want to remember that we have the Chinook Nation and we have the Clatsop Nehalem Nation. So they're 2. And again, because things change, if there's a correct way to generically say that rather than limiting language that may or may not change in the future.
Yeah, I think the language we had decided on a few meetings back was that we weren't going to identify by name, but we were going to use the term Native American.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would be in support of adding that kind of a policy to that earlier goal to be sure to notify them. Good.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Gail, for that suggestion. Okay, so well, I'm just going to clarify, Susanna here. So we're back to discussion of the motion to retain policy 4 as written. So discussion on that motion of retaining policy 4 as written. Susanna, was your discussion point on that, or we can discuss the notification of the Native American groups when we get to new policies, if your comment was on that?
No, my question, which might lead to a comment, is are water rights sold? And I know that the Warrenton water supply is kind of fragile, and perhaps Warrenton would want to buy that water right, and then it might become problematic for Youngs River Falls. And I don't know what to think about that. Does anybody know? I'm assuming water rights can be sold.
It certainly appears that there's a big market in
And
them.
then, yes, and there's a big market in bottling water and selling it. So I see that as problematic.
Okay, thanks, Susanna. Any further discussion on the motion to retain policy 4? Okay, so I'm not seeing further discussion on that. Let's go to a vote. Is there any objection to the motion to retain policy 4 as written? Not seeing or hearing any objection. Just one more time, anyone object to retaining policy 4 as written? Okay, seeing none, I believe we have unanimous consent to retain policy 4 as written. Okay, so on to the next section, goal 13, energy sources policies. So policy 1 under energy sources, or excuse me, I think that should be energy conservation policies for this section. Policy 1 under Goal 13, Energy Conservation, is Policy 1. The county recognizes the need for energy conservation through support of a countywide conservation program in which the county government would play a leading role. A, methods to reduce energy consumption should be explored, such as reinforcing strict temperature and lighting controls in government buildings and incentive programs for carpooling, etc. We'll handle the sort of preamble and item A as a group here. So staff recommendation is to retain sub-policy A. Most of the groups supported.
I move, so moved.
So moved?
Yes.
Second.
Is that a motion? I just want to make sure, do we want to incorporate this telecommuting, or are we just moving to retain as written? Since that was also out of your group, Todd.
Yeah. Okay, that's true. Yes, let's do as for carpooling and telecommuting.
Okay.
So that's an amendment to the motion.
Okay.
I retract my motion to
no,
pass
that's
this
okay.
as is.
That's okay. So we've got a motion coming out of Southwest CAC to insert after for carpooling and telecommuting. Is there any, or actually, is there a second for that motion?
I second it.
Okay, thank you, Jan. So is there any discussion on the insertion of and telecommuting?
Just a scrivener of spelling telecommuting.
Sure. Oh, commuting. Yeah, thank you. Okay, any discussion for the insertion of and telecommuting? Okay, if not, is there any objection to the insertion of and telecommuting? Okay, so seeing or hearing no objection, that amendment is accepted. Todd, do you want to make a motion on the full retention?
Sure. I move that we pass the amendment or policy 1 as amended.
Okay, so I just want to be clear. This is policy 1, preamble and subsection A. So I've got a motion to retain policy 1, preamble and sub-policy A as amended. Is there a second for that?
I second.
I think Jim was trying to get his second in there, so I'm going to take that one this time. Is there a discussion of retention of this policy, or policy 1 and preamble and A? Okay, so I'm not seeing much discussion. Is there any objection for the retention of the amended policy 1 preamble and sub-policy A? Any objection to us retaining that as amended? Okay, so I hear no objection. So by unanimous consent, we will retain that as amended. So let's go on to sub-policy B. Sub-policy B reads, new government buildings shall be energy efficient. Decision on design and selection of equipment should not be based on the lowest initial cost alone. Operating and energy costs for a reasonable life expectancy of the building must receive equal consideration. Further, consideration should be given to the use of solar energy and other renewable energy sources in heating and cooling all new government buildings. Staff recommendation is to retain sub-policy B. I will, I guess, clarify here. I read off the and other renewable energy sources. within the body of the text. It's my belief that that's actually an amendment coming out of Northeast. Is that correct, Gail?
That's correct.
Okay. So my apologies for reading that inside the text. Cheryl, can I take a motion to amend from you to just have us work on that and other renewable energy sources first?
Motion to amend policy 1, subtopic B, to add the words "and other renewable energy sources" after solar energy.
Thank you. Is there a second for that motion?
I second it.
Second.
Thank you, Jim. So I've got a motion and a second to insert the words "and other renewable energy sources" after solar energy in the text. Is there a discussion of that amendment? Jim?
On the amendment, no, I have no discussion on the amendment. I do have a discussion on 1B, but
Okay.
I don't know when it's appropriate to talk about that.
Let me come back to you. If there's no discussion on the amended language, I'll get to you first in the next queue. Okay. So is there discussion on the insertion of "and other renewable energy sources"? Okay, seeing and hearing no discussion on that. Is there any objection to the insertion of "and other renewable energy sources"? Any objection? Okay, so hearing no objection, by unanimous consent, we accept the insertion of "and other renewable energy sources." So we'll go back to a motion. I'll take motion off the table from the Clatsop Plains CAC to support staff recommendation to take this amended sub-policy B and retain it. So let's go to discussion of retention of amended sub-policy B. Is there discussion from the floor on this total sub-policy B? And I see your hand again, Jim.
I like what's in here. I don't think it's inclusive enough. I encourage, personally, I feel we should encourage the reuse of existing buildings. So it does not cover major renovation of, say, for instance, the county building that Gail works out of. I think it should also include new government buildings, and major renovations of existing structures shall be energy efficient and retain the rest. And not defining what major is, I think we'd just leave that as is.
Jim, do you have proposed language for that, or alternatively, is that something you would propose as new policy?
No, it's I propose to amend the existing or the adopted 1B as amended to also be amended to include new government buildings and major renovations to existing structures shall be energy efficient and retain the rest.
Okay. So I've got a motion to insert the words "after buildings" in the first line and major renovations to existing structures. Is there a second for that motion?
I second it.
Second.
Okay, Jan, thank you. Is there a discussion of this this insertion? Is there a discussion on this item?
Yeah,
Okay, so Todd, and then I saw your hand, Susanna. So Todd first.
it would seem to me that we could just simplify it by saying any construction on government buildings shall be energy efficient. Oh, never mind. I think I think Jim's amendment is fine. I withdraw any comment.
Okay, thanks, Todd. Susanna?
I was just interested from Gail's, if she has any view on the wording major construction. Is it problematic, or do you think that's clear enough?
I think it's clear enough. We have very few major renovations coming through. We're going to be required, if we're replacing electrical or plumbing fixtures, to put in energy efficient fixtures as well. So it really doesn't make a difference.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the insertion of and major renovations to existing structures? Any other discussion on that amendment? Okay, let me ask, is there any objection to the addition of and major renovations to existing structures? Any objection to that? Okay, hearing none, the amendment is accepted. So I have a question here. This could be for Gail or maybe for the rest of the group's consideration. Generally, I take B, sub-policy B, as a sub-policy about government buildings. But the second sentence seems to be about equipment. And I feel like the second sentence could be applicable to buildings if it said buildings instead of equipment. And I'm not sure that if we need separate policies for the two things, or if how it's being considered for equipment purchases. Yeah, so that's just a general question. I'm thinking the comprehensive plan doesn't really have the ability to speak to equipment purchases for the county. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But I'm also thinking that maybe it should rather say buildings or construction rather than equipment. Gail, do you have a take on that?
Reading it, I think that they would have looked at it as mechanical equipment, so things like plumbing, heating, air conditioning, electrical, not equipment in terms of desks and computers and telephones, that type of equipment. It was more the mechanical equipment that makes the building operate.
Okay. If everybody else is happy with that, then I mean, I don't have a motion to make. I just wanted to ask about that. Okay, so we have let's take a motion out of committee again. So let's say in this case, Lewis and Clark committee, their motion from committee was to support staff recommendation. So let's take that to the floor. So we've got a motion to retain as amended sub-policy B. Is there discussion of the retention of sub-policy B as amended? Okay, so I'm not seeing discussion on this. Is there any objection to the retention of sub-policy B as amended? Any objection to that? Okay, so hearing and seeing no objection, I think we can consider as that as unanimous consent to retain sub-policy B as amended. So we'll move on to C, and C is kind of a long one, so bear with me here. Susanna, did you have comment before I read off C?
I want a little break.
Okay.
We have time for a little break?
I think that's
5
fair
minutes.
enough. We usually do have break time, and I think this is a reasonably good time to do it. If there's no objection from the group, let's take a 5-minute break. So a 5-minute bathroom break for everyone. I've got 2:47. Oh, just clicked at 2:48. So I'll try to get us restarted at 2:53. So 5-minute break for everybody.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so we'll pick up again on Goal 13, Energy Conservation Policies. Policy 1, Sub-Policy C. That sub-policy reads, the county, cities, extension service, and community college should work together to establish an energy conservation service with the assistance of private and public funds and expertise. This service could provide the following. 1, promote energy conservation through seminars, other educational programs, and information dissemination. 2, develop climate maps, energy efficient building standards, and other guidelines for energy conservation. 3, with the help of local utility companies, provide technical assistance to individuals desiring to retrofit their homes or buildings with improved insulation of alternative, installation of alternative energy sources. 4, conduct audits with the assistance of local utility companies to identify sources of greatest energy wastes in buildings and recommend ways in which to reduce this waste. 5, provide technical assistance to evaluate the energy efficiency of new residential, industrial, and commercial building plans submitted for approval. And 6, maintain information on the energy efficiency of brands and models of appliances, autos, etc. Staff comment on this sub-policy is no conservation service currently exists. If such a committee were to be convened in the future, staff would recommend that it not duplicate information or data being provided by state agencies. Energy calculations are currently required with building permit applications. Building code staff currently review plans submitted for approval and can provide comments and suggestions as required. However, staff primarily reviews for compliance with state building codes. Any recommendations or suggestions, if offered, would be purely voluntary and not mandatory. The staff recommendation is to delete sub-policies C2, C4, C5, and C6. Coming out of the CAC groups, all CAC groups support staff recommendation. Elsie Jewell also asks, would tax abatement programs be available to offset costs for homeowners who make energy efficiency upgrades? Is that, Susanna, is that county level tax abatement programs? Was that the question coming out of Elsie Jewell? Just for clarification. And you appear to be muted. I don't know if you're speaking or not.
I'm not sure that the county, I mean, there are a lot of programs, energy trust programs that are available. I don't know if the county has a role in allocating county taxes in this way. That's a question to Gail.
Gail, do you have feedback on that?
I don't know the answer as to whether the county could reduce or freeze property taxes or have some sort of property tax refund for installing energy efficient appliances or improvements. I do know that there are typically personal income tax write-offs that you can get and rebates that are available when you do these types of things, but in terms of it being paid out through property tax, I don't know the answer. I would suspect not. But...
Okay, thank you, Gail. Jim?
I also have a question for Gail. Is there an existing body that crosses essentially the individuals or the cities that are mentioned there? I'm not too sure about the CCC or the Extension Service already in existence. And the reason why I'm asking is that instead of having a standalone county policy that tries to create something new, is just say that the policy will support energy conservation through this existing group.
Okay, I think if I understand your question correctly, Jim, you're asking, is there some organization other than the proposed conservation service that would exist to promote energy efficiency? Is that your question?
Well, instead of trying to create something new, is to just attach this, the objective of this policy to an existing policy board that's already made up of cities within the county and maybe some additional group. I'm not sure if it's going to cover every single one that's listed there.
Jim, are you asking about a group that's agnostic to the question of energy efficiency right now, but just a group that exists that brings these people together?
That's correct. Depends on their charter, of course, in terms of, you know, what the scope of their existing charter is.
To the best of my knowledge, there's not a group that exists. I think that different bodies convene at different times to discuss very particular issues, but I'm not aware of an ongoing entity that would include county, cities, extension service, a community college that would meet on a regular basis and had just a general enough purpose of meeting to take up and promote this cause.
Thank you, Gail.
Gail, do you or does anyone else know? I understand staff is saying that no conservation service currently exists. Did this ever get formed? Did this happen at one time and just fell out, or has this just not been done?
I don't know the answer to that, sorry.
Okay. Does anyone with more tenure between the comp plan and now know if this ever happened temporarily? Okay, sounds like not. Okay, so is there, should I just take a motion out of the one of the CACs as normal to handle this? I'm not hearing amendments or anything at the moment, so let's try that. So Northeast CAC supported the staff recommendation, which was to retain the sub-policy overall, but delete sub-policy C2, C4, C5, and C6.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Robert. So let's take that motion up. Is there discussion of the motion to retain the policy but delete subsections 2, 4, 5, and 6? Any discussion of that motion? So to be clear on the effect here, just as far as maybe spurring discussions or clarity anyway. So this would retain the mission of trying to create an energy conservation service. It would retain the notion that they should promote energy conservation through educational programs and information dissemination. It would retain that they should, with the help of local utility companies, provide technical assistance to individuals desiring to retrofit their homes. It would not include the other sections. Can I ask, it's improved? I have a feeling, and I may be wrong about this, that there is a typo in 3. I'm actually thinking at the moment that the typo is of should be or in the third line. So
And would be better.
With improved insulation or alternative energy sources, but I'm open to conversation on this. It just as it reads, I'm not sure it seems grammatically correct to me.
Andy?
Yeah.
So
and would be a better alternative. And I agree with your assessment there. It needs to be changed, but and instead of or.
Okay. Thank you, Todd. Gail, did you have feedback on that?
Yeah, the actual text was typed just as it is in the adopted version that says installation of alternative energy sources.
Thank you, Gail, for bringing up the original text. Is it possible, might I ask for an amendment motion from the floor to change of to a different word? since I
I
can't
move
make.
we change the, I move we change of to and.
Okay, is there a second for that motion? Jan raised her hand for a second. Thank you, Jan. Is there any objection to changing of to and in C3? So I'm not seeing any objection. So let's just accept that change. Okay, so sorry for that little diversion there. So we're back to staff recommendation, motion to accept staff recommendation and discussion on that motion. Jim?
I don't know if anybody else is uncomfortable with the establishment of the let me try to get to the next page, conservation service. I really don't understand what that means. I like the concept of the county working with the cities, CCC and extensive service to promote energy conservation. I'm wondering if we need to just drop that conservation service, just say that the county should work with all of those entities for the very same things as the staff recommended, in terms of dropping the points that the staff, leaving the staff the same as just changing conservation service to for the county to work with these other entities. Gail, unless Gail understands what that means to establish conservation service, it's in capital letters, so it seems like it means something rather than just words.
So can I append a question to Jim's there, which is just, does the comprehensive plan allow us to create agencies? Because I mean, that's what it seems like we're doing, or what, not we, but what the comp plan is doing here. They're even sort of suggesting that they get a budget, you know, like, can the comp plan do that?
Apparently it did. I mean,
or it didn't. I mean, it didn't have that effect, right?
I mean, it doesn't create it. By putting the policy in, the committee's not magically created. What the policy was intended to do was to say that the county should do this in the future, not that this was automatically done by including this policy in the comprehensive plan. And I would support Jim's suggestion of removing that wording regarding the conservation service.
Okay, thank you, Gail. Robert?
Just Penny Scrivener, where you were changing of, do we mean a strikeout down on C3, end of C3? Is that a strikeout of the word of?
Yes, I believe that's correct. That we were replacing of with and. Does that make sense, Robert, to you?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It was just that one word that somehow, yeah.
So Jim, do you have proposed amendment language that you'd like to put forward here, since you've got maybe some clarification from Gail there? Oh, you're muted, sir. Sorry.
Okay. I'm not sure if this would be the appropriate language, but the county will work with cities, extensive services, service, and community college to promote energy conservation with by assisting private and public funds. Well, I'm not too sure, but the concept is that the county should work with the very same entities to promote energy conservation, and have it worded such that it retains all of the ones that the staff recommended, like, you know, C1, C3, C1 and C3, really.
So let me, let me restate what I'm understanding here. The
Please
motion,
do.
the motion is to replace the preamble of C with the county should work together with cities, extension service, and community college too. I don't think you need any more.
Okay, that would be fine. That's the concept.
Does that make sense, Gail? Sorry, I'm talking while you're feverishly trying to also communicate this. I'm not sure the coordinated promotions part needs to be there, Gail. Can I restate what?
So do we not need something to lead into the to explain the two subsections that we're going to leave?
I think should work together to promote energy conservation still works. We may have to amend language at the beginning of 3.
I see. So the colon would go there.
Yeah, right. Jim did state it a little different. The formulation was the county should work together with the other entities to, so the county should work together with cities, extension service, and community college to
Promote.
So just kill everything from where the cursor is through the word following. You know, so you go direct from the colon to subparagraph 1.
Yeah.
Kill establishing energy conservation service with the assistance of private and public funds and expertise. The service could provide the following. All that disappears.
Okay, thank you, Gail. And do you mind moving should work together with to after the county? The county should work together with. Sorry, this is a bit of a confusing amendment at the second, but I'll try to.
Right.
But it's getting the gist of what I was suggesting. So I like these word changes.
Okay, so I'm going to try to restate the amendment just so that we can get a clean motion on the table. So Jim has moved to replace the preamble language of subpolicy C with the language the county should work together with the cities, extension service, and community college too. So that's replacing the entire language of subpolicy C, not inclusive of the subpoints, with the language the county should work together with the cities, extension service, and community college too, colon. Is there a second for that motion?
Maybe kill the comma. You know, should work together, no comma.
Okay.
The comma does have a strike through, yes.
Okay, thank you, Gail. Is there a second for that motion? Okay, thank you, Cheryl. So is there discussion of that motion? Discussion of the motion to replace the subpolicy C with the amended language?
Yeah, I have discussion.
Sure, Todd, go ahead.
It works fine with subpolicy 1. Are we talking about those yet, or should we leave it alone until we get to those?
Well, I think
because it doesn't work with 3.
Yeah, if you've got suggestions of, I think it's worth discussing how it interacts with 1 and 3 since they're retained in the main motion. It would be a separate motion to actually change them if we retain this one.
Okay, let's wait then.
Okay. Any discussion on just the replacement amendment? Okay, let's see. Is there any objection to the replacement of sub-policy C with the language the county should work together with the cities, extension service, and community college 2: Any objection to that replacement? Okay, so hearing no objection, we can retain that language. Thank you, Gail, for your patience and flexibility in recording that piece. And then let's go back to, so we've got discussion of an amended main motion here, which was to retain sub-policy C, but delete C2, C4, C5, and C6. So we've got amended language on a couple of fronts here. But Todd, I'll go to you for discussion first if you have a point of discussion or a motion about C3.
I do. I think that if it were to say college 2, of course 1 is promote, and then 3 would be coordinate with local utility companies to provide technical assistance. So you would strike.
Sure.
You got it?
Yeah, I understand the motion, I believe. So the motion is to amend C3 to read coordinate with local utility companies to provide.
Right.
Is there a second for the motion to amend the language of C3?
I second it.
Okay, thank you, Jim. So the motion on the table is to amend the language of C3 for the first line to read coordinate with local utility companies to provide. Sorry, Gail, there's a replacement of a comma with a to. Is there discussion on that amended language? Okay, so I'm not seeing or hearing discussion on that. Is there any objection to the amended language in the motion? Any objection to that? So hearing no objection, that amendment is accepted. So C3 now will start with the language coordinate with local utility companies to provide technical assistance. Okay, so back to the main motion. We have a motion to retain sub-policy C, to delete sub-policy C2, C4, C5, and C6. Is there discussion, further discussion or motions on the main motion? Okay, let's go to a vote on this one. Is there any objection to the retention of sub-policy C and as amended, and the deletion of sub-policies C2, C4, C5, and C6? Any objection to that? Okay, so hearing no objection, we will retain sub-policy C and C1 and C3 as amended. Thank you all. Let's move to sub-policy D. Sub-policy D reads, the county and cities should work together to establish a countywide recycling operation, i.e. through a sheltered workshop program. Staff comment reads, recycling is available through Recology. Additionally, in 2020, the county opened the household hazardous waste facility, where car batteries, fluorescent lights, and other hazardous materials can be safely disposed. Staff recommendation is to revise policy to state that the county will continue to support, promote, and expand recycling opportunities. There are various comments. CPCAC supports staff recommendation. Northeast CAC supports the recommendation, but asks about what control does county have over curbside recycling. Southwest has a longer comment about incorporating reduction and reuse before recycling. and encouraging businesses to use compostable, recyclable consumables, and consider bans of non-compostable or recyclable consumables like single-use plastics and styrofoam, and encourage cooperation on that front with cities. Elsie Jewell supports staff recommendation with the comment or question, how are waste management contracts awarded in the county? And note the need of curbside recycling in the eastern part of the county, as in Elsie Jewell and Hamlet. And Lewis and Clark recommends a language change to delete the sheltered workshop language. So I think we've got a few different things going on. Maybe first I'll ask Gail, can you answer the questions from the CACs about curbside recycling and waste management contracts in the county?
I do not know how the county determines and awards its waste management contracts. There really wasn't a question about curbside recycling. It was a statement that more was wanted in that part of the county.
Oh, I meant the question from Northeast about which may go on the same front, which is what control does the county have over curbside recycling?
Yeah, at this time, I don't know the answer to those questions.
Okay. So there are some issues brought up here, especially from maybe Southwest, as well as Lewis and Clark, about language changes or content changes. Is there a motion from the floor about how we should proceed on subpolicy D?
I suggest that the Southwest language about recycling be a separate new policy.
Robert, as the Southwest liaison, how do you feel about that that notion?
I'm not Southwest liaison.
I am.
I'm sorry about that. So Todd, I guess, how do you feel about moving it to new policy?
That's what I suggested.
Okay, that was sort of a joke, Todd. But okay, so we can take up or move the incorporation of reduction and reuse and the questions about compostable and recyclable consumables to new policies, if that's okay with you, Gail. And then let's then talk about with this group what we should do with language changes to sub-policy D. We do have a staff recommendation for revision. We also have a recommendation from Lewis and Clark to delete a particular piece of language. Does anyone have a notion of how we should proceed here?
Again, may I? Sorry.
Sure, Todd.
I don't want to see the sheltered workshops be in this one, but it seems it's a very important concept. And I wondered, Gail, does the county have any kind of a policy about supporting sheltered workshops?
I don't even know what that means.
A sheltered workshop is for disabled people to get work in an environment where their disability does not impair them from doing the work, such as sorting envelopes or doing that kind of easy task.
Okay, so going back to your question, what was your question, Todd? I'm sorry.
The question is, does the county have any policies or any practices that encourage, promote, or otherwise put forth the idea of using sheltered workshops?
There's nothing in the land use policies. I would need to check with the county's volunteer coordinator and/or HR director to see if there were any policies in place.
Then that's a good answer, because it means that we shouldn't probably be dealing with this in land use.
Yeah.
I think it is part of the county contract with
AC?
Developmental Disability Services to have a supported employment program, which I think runs under the county behavioral health contract, for what it's worth, Todd. But I don't know that they have a sheltered workshop in county. Okay, so Todd, are you making a motion there to change the language, or do you just want, was that just a discussion point?
Okay, I move that going along with Northeast or whichever it was that suggested we delete the language,
Okay.
i.e. through sheltered workshop program
Okay,
from
thank
this,
you.
from this one.
So I've got a motion to delete the parenthetical, i.e. through a sheltered workshop program. Is there a second for that motion?
I second it.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Is there a discussion on that motion?
I just wanted to say something, that when you see people downtown in Astoria cleaning windows, that's the contract.
Thank you, Jan. Any further discussion on the amendment? Jim?
Well, my comment on the amendment is that I would like to propose rewriting D completely and excluding through sheltered workshops. So if we're discussing this particular amendment to delete, that's all I'm going to say at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Cheryl?
I would echo what Jim just said. Through sheltered workshops, I think is a sort of a side detail that we can deal with later. Yeah, I'm in favor of deleting all of D and going with some kind of language close to what staff recommended there. The county will continue to support, promote, and expand recycling opportunities. So something around that language, I think, should be the whole new policy.
Okay, let's deal with the amendment that's on the table, and then I can come back to you for a further amendment. Okay. Suzanne, I saw a hand up from you as well.
One of our group discussions was that the cost for curbside recycling would be too much for the Jewel area.
And I don't think that's sorry. I don't think that's germane to the amendment that's on the table, which is just deletion of through a sheltered workshop program. Was your comment going in that direction?
Oh, okay. No,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
I support the deletion. Yeah.
Okay. So let me ask: is there any objection to the deletion of IE through a sheltered workshop program? Any objection to deleting that line? Okay, so I don't hear any objection to that, so we can delete that. And then Cheryl, I'll go back to you because I think you have a motion to change language, and then we can have discussion on that motion. So Cheryl, what was your motion?
Process-wise, I sort of like it when we talk about it a little bit and then make the motion. Then we don't end up doing so many amendments to change the language. One of them earlier today, we actually talked about it before we finalized the wording, and I sort of like that process. So at this point, I would be interested in hearing what others have to say about how the language could be before any of us suggest a motion yet.
Okay.
Exactly how the procedure usually works, though, Cheryl, unfortunately.
Yep.
You have to propose something before you can discuss it.
So do we have a motion or an amendment from the floor that we can move forward on here? Jim, I see a hand.
Yes, I have a motion to replace D with the following. The county will continue to support, promote, and expand recycling opportunities. I'm going to leave that as such. As an aside, I like the direction that Todd wants to use, and I'm not sure if a separate policy or just be a subheading to this revised or this proposed change. I'm not sure which one would be best, but I do like that idea. I believe that we're too passive, and we need to be a little more out in front of the issue, especially of plastics.
Okay, thank you, Jim. So there's a motion on the table to replace the amended language of D with the language, the county will continue to support, promote, and expand recycling opportunities. Is there a second for that motion?
I second.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Is there discussion on that motion or amendments to it? Cheryl?
I like this wording. This is much more proactive than the original one. Should work together to establish a recycling operation. Technically, we have a recycling operation. For us in the rural counties, it's once a weekend. We haul it there, you know, and the bins fill up really fast. That we would support, promote, and expand the recycling opportunities. I like this one. It's very positive. It's very proactive.
Thanks, Cheryl. Further discussion?
Hey, yeah. I'd like to add then to this, and to discourage the use of non-combustible or non-compostable, recyclable consumables. And then we don't need the IE.
Okay. So
It would be just that
we're changing it to a period, and then and to discourage the use of non-compostable, recyclable consumables, period.
Let's say non-recyclable.
Okay.
Non-compostable, non-recyclable consumables.
Okay, so we've got a motion to add to the end of the statement, and will discourage the use of non-compostable, or / non-recyclable consumables. Is there a second for that amendment? Susanna, is that a hand for a second?
Oh, sure, I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. So is there discussion on the addition of and will discourage the use of non-compostable, non-recyclable consumables? Jan and then Susanna.
I'm just curious, given the existing structure of the county, who would you expect to do that? How would that work?
Todd, do you have any discussion on that point?
Well, Jan comes with a very good point. I mean, how do you actually implement such a thing? It's good. It's a good thought, but I'd still leave it in, even though it's difficult to implement.
Okay, Susanna and then Jim.
I have a couple things. Are packaging plastics, are those consumables? I'm assuming yes.
I believe that that's true, yes.
And then the one thing I think that would be really good for out in the Jewel area and also up maybe towards Birkenfeld are recyclable drop-off sites, because curbside pickup wouldn't be economically feasible for our company without raising rates. And we were kind of, I think, our group in agreement that we would like to see the county supporting a few drop sites for recycling. And then the third comment is Cartum, would you call it company down in Manzanita, was really quite remarkable. I don't know why it wasn't allowed to go forward, but it did all that and made money, I think, or at least supported itself. That's all.
That's in Tillamook County, isn't it?
Yes, was. It's no longer. People
Okay,
were very sad to see it go.
is there further discussion on this? Yeah, Gail?
So the Southwest recommendation applied that discouragement of non-compostable, non-recyclable consumables specifically for businesses. Will we now be looking to apply this to every property owner and resident within the county?
Say based on the language proposed, that would be a yes. Susanna?
So, Gail, would you discuss using the word discourage? Is it did you kind of imply that businesses are discouraged? And what do you think of the word discouraged and implications for the county?
I personally didn't pick the word. The language that Southwest had originally proposed was encourage businesses to use compostable, recyclable consumables. It seems like now we've switched that language to discourage anybody throughout the county from using something that's non-compostable or non-recyclable. So.
Further discussion on the amendment?
Keeping in
Jim?
mind that this is an aspirational thing,
Jim?
Well, yeah, I see Gail's point, and also would like to add, if you also notice, they have the Southwest CCAC has cooperation with cities. So I'd like to see, this isn't a proposal, this is just for discussion. After the word and, the county will continue to support, promote, and expand recycling opportunities and coordinate with the cities within the county. I don't know if that's understood. To encourage the or discourage the use of non-compostable, non-recyclable consumables from businesses or something like that to address Gail's concern. But my point is that I think the county doesn't have to go out and do this by themselves. It should be in cooperation with the cities within the counties. And we somehow need to encourage the use of recyclables or discourage the use of non-recyclable consumables from businesses. And I'm sure that's not quite right, but that's the sentiment.
Jim, am I understanding you correctly? You're not making a motion to amend language at the moment?
No, this is just discussion. That's correct.
Okay. Further discussion on the proposed language will discourage the use of non-compostable, non-recyclable consumables. Okay, let me ask for a vote here. Is there any objection to the addition and will discourage the use of non-compostable, non-recyclable consumables? Any objection to adding that language? Jim, is that objection? Okay, so let's go to a vote on it then. I'll ask for a voice vote. So the vote is, should we add the language and will discourage the use of non-compostable, non-recyclable consumables? Jim, how do you vote on adding that language?
No.
Okay. Todd, how do you vote? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you there, Todd.
yes.
Okay, yes, thank you. Susanna, how do you vote?
Yes.
Robert, how do you vote?
Aye.
Cheryl, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jan, how do you vote?
No,
Okay, by a vote of 4-2, the amendment passes. So we're back to the main motion, which is to replace sub-policy D with the language now amended. The county will continue to support, promote, and expand recycling opportunities and will discourage the use of non-compostable, non-recyclable consumables. Is there discussion on the amended motion? Jim?
As I previously mentioned, I like the sentiment. I think that the wording is be problematic for the county. In terms of the discussion on the amendment, that's all I'm gonna have to say at this point.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Is there further discussion? Okay, so I'm not seeing further discussion. I'll just restate the motion before we vote. So the motion is to replace sub-policy D with the language, the county will continue to support, promote, and expand recycling opportunities and will discourage the use of non-compostable, non-recyclable consumables. I'll do a voice vote on this one. Jim, how do you vote on that replacement?
I have no problems with the language. I would like to propose an amendment, but that this isn't the time.
yeah,
So is that a yes or a no vote?
Yes,
sir?
that is a yes.
Okay, thank you. Todd Lundy, how do you vote?
I vote yes, aye.
Thank you. Suzanne Gladwin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Robert Strickland, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Jan Mitchell, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Cheryl Johnson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. So by a vote of 6-0, the motion passes. So we will replace the sub-policy D with the amended language. Jim, did you have a point of order or a motion?
Yes, I have a motion to amend what we just passed to be worded, the county will continue to support, promote, and expand recycling opportunities and will coordinate with the cities to discourage the use of non-compostable, non-recyclable consumables emanating from businesses. So whatever the proper end is, to not get the consumers, the individuals trapped in this, but I think we all agree we're talking about either bags or takeouts.
Okay.
So did you catch what it is? I'm not sure of the correct ending of it, and we'll coordinate with this. Right.
We'll coordinate with cities.
Right. And I don't know if you have to say cities within Clackamas or within the county. I don't know if you need to do that.
We've used just broadly cities before without clarifying counties, so I don't know if we need to add that language, add further language. Non-recyclable consumables emanating from businesses, I believe, is the language you use.
That's the that's what I said, but that's subject to discussion.
Okay. So the motion is to insert the words coordinate with cities between will and discourage, and to insert the words emanating from businesses at the end of sub-policy D. Is there a second for that motion? I see a hand from Cheryl seconding that motion. Is that correct, Cheryl? Yeah, you're seconding. Okay, so is there discussion on this amendment to add this language, coordinate with cities and emanating from businesses?
You
Jim.
can't see my hand, can you?
I cannot, Todd. Can we take Jim's comment and then come to you?
Sure.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask Gail if there is better wording to end that sentence to avoid problems. I think you understand the gist of where I'd like to go with this.
I hate to see another amendment have to go through here. What I would have recommended would be that perhaps it could say coordinate with cities to discourage businesses from using non-compostable, non-recyclable
Yeah, that's what I was
consumables.
going to suggest.
Good, good. No, that's great.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me, procedurally, the easiest way for us to do that is to just vote this one down quickly and then go to another amendment motion if we want to do that quick. So can I ask, and I'll just go through quickly, Jim, how do you vote on the amendment for the language to add the language coordinate with cities to and emanating from business? How do you vote?
No.
Okay, thank you. Todd, how do you vote?
No.
Susanna, how do you vote?
No.
Thank you. Robert, how do you vote?
No.
Cheryl, how do you vote?
No.
Jan, how do you vote?
Nope.
Okay, so the motion fails. I'll throw it back to you, Jim, in case you want to make an additional motion.
I'd like somebody else to make the amendment.
Okay, is there? I'll ask the floor. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion to amend language? And Gail, if it's permissible for you and you don't feel like you're guiding us too much, you might even write the language that you just suggested in so that someone could easily make the motion.
Coordinate.
I'd be willing to make the move that we accept the languages provided by Gail.
Okay, so Jan has moved that we accept the language provided by staff to insert the words coordinate with cities to discourage businesses from. Is there a second for that motion?
Yes, second.
Thank you, Todd. So let's discuss. Is there any discussion for the insertion of coordinate with cities to discourage businesses from? Susanna?
You, Andy, used business and businesses, but the wording is just business.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing out my misreading there. So the current language is.
Oh, Gail changed it to businesses,
I think
which makes more sense to me.
I think grammatically businesses was the original language from Jim, so we're okay retaining that. Thank you, Gail, and thank you, Susanna, for pointing that out. So just to clarify, the language that we've got in front of us right now is coordinate with cities to discourage businesses from the use of non-compostable, non-recyclable consumables. Is there a discussion on that? Todd, you came off mute. Did you have a discussion point?
Just want to vote aye and get on with it.
Okay. All right, let's move to a vote. So on the insertion of the language, the motion is to insert the language coordinate with cities to discourage businesses from. Jim, how do you vote on the motion?
Yes.
Okay, Todd, how do you vote?
Yeah.
Susanna, how do you vote?
Yes.
Robert, how do you vote?
Aye.
Cheryl, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Jan, how do you vote? Okay, I think I saw a yes. Could you confirm that? I didn't hear it.
Yes.
Thank you. So by a vote of 6-0, the amendment passes. Thank you all. Are we ready to move on to policy 2, or do we have further action on policy 1 at this time, or policy 1D rather? Okay, so seeing nothing further on policy 1D, I'll move on to policy 2. Again, we're going to handle this with preamble and sub-policy A first. So, and then we'll handle sub-policy B. Actually, maybe I guess staff comment applies to all of it, huh? Is that correct, Gail? So I should read all of this one?
Sorry, I had to reread my recommendation. I guess A and B1 we're asking to be deleted. So you might want to handle those two together, and then B2 and B3 we're asking to retain, so those could probably be grouped. We didn't make a comment on the preamble, but I would recommend retaining that.
Okay, thank you. So maybe as far as the clean motions and everything, maybe we can handle it like the longer section in C in policy 1 where we deleted a couple things and left some in. Let's try to read the whole thing and see if we can just get one clean motion out of it. So policy 2, and this is under goal 13, energy conservation. Policy 2, the following land use policies shall be adopted as part of the comprehensive plan to conserve energy and promote the use of alternative systems. Shopping, cultural, medical, educational, and other public facilities shall be encouraged to cluster so that one trip can serve.
Yeah, actually,
that,
the highlighted areas were areas where Southwest Coastal had recommended changes.
Okay.
These are not approved, so
I'll go ahead and read them then. Thank you.
Yeah.
So to cluster in urban growth boundaries so that one trip can serve several purposes and so that the possibility of public transportation will be enhanced. Subpolicy B, in new subdivisions, major or minor partitions, 1 should maximize the opportunity for solar orientation of windows in buildings by running streets in east-west directions and lots on a north-south axis. When topographic conditions or natural features make street orientation for good solar orientation of units undesirable or difficult, lots shall be laid out to maximize solar exposure so that units can be oriented to the south to the greatest extent possible. Clustering, innovative yard and setback approaches may be used in lieu of the street and lot plan if good solar orientation is achieved. 2, open space should be located whenever possible to buffer structures from shadows cast by other buildings. 3, easements for protecting solar access should be provided for every lot. So staff comment on this is subpolicies A and B1 are in the adopted comprehensive plan and or in the various community plans. Staff did not locate subpolicies B2 and B3, but may have missed them. Subpolicy B2 only works on the assumption that the developer or staff would know exactly where every future building would be placed and how tall those buildings would be. It does not appear to be practically enforceable. Subpolicy B3 could be considered a regulatory taking. However, as currently written, it is not mandatory. So staff recommendation is to delete subpolicies A and B1 as those subpolicies are already adopted, and to retain subpolicies B2 and B3. From the CACs, we have support of staff recommendation from 4 of the CACs. There are some amendments proposed out of Southwest CAC, Coastal CAC, and LC Jewell supports staff recommendation but notes the need for more local commercial, medical, and cultural opportunities in the LC Jewell area. So for policy 2, so we've got amendments that are highlighted in the text from Southwest Coastal. It would be my preference to take them one at a time so that we could work through them. If that's purposeful to the group, I'll just ask, is there any objection to handling these 3 proposed amendments one at a time here? Any objection to that? Cheryl?
The staff recommendation is that we eliminate A and B1 altogether. If we're going to end up there, we should not spend time amending them before we choose to eliminate them.
That's a fair point. Okay, would you like to make a motion to get us started then? That might be appropriate.
I move that we adopt the staff recommendation to delete A and B1, keep the, whatever you call that little opening part of the language, and keep 2 and keep 3.
Okay, thank you. So I have a motion from the floor to delete, to retain policy 2, but delete sub-policy A and sub-policy B1. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Jan. So I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on that motion? Robert?
I have a question about 2B3. Does that preclude someone having tall trees because they cast a shadow?
We would need to see the easement language in order to address that question.
Do we have, I mean, the language indicates that we should have solar easements on every lot now. Is that in fact the case?
No, the language says that in new subdivisions, major or minor partitions, we should be encouraging, well, I guess, should be provided for solar protection. We have not been asking people to do that. If somebody were to do it, it would be a private matter between the parties involved, the property owners, and the county would not be a party to the easement. So without seeing a specific easement language, I cannot answer Mr. Strickland's question.
All right, thank you for clarifying and correcting me there, Gail. Susanna, you had your hand up, and then Todd.
Yes, I have 2 points, but to what was just discussed. I think, if one puts in a solar project on one's house and then something is built that shades it out, can be very problematic. I don't know if the wording should be here. I don't know what to suggest in dealing with that. And then the other thing is that I want to be sure that the concerns on my group that we really need, medical, educational, cultural resources located in our part of the county. We feel that we kind of left out, and I don't know if it would be addressed and where it would be addressed. Those are my 2 comments.
Okay, thank you, Susanna. Is there other discussion on the motion, which is to retain policy 2 but delete A and B1? Todd, did you come off mute to discuss?
Yeah, I think with regard to the policy 3 or B3, we could treat it somewhat like we have the view corridors in Southwest, whereas if they're established to begin with, then future development can't block a solar easement or a solar access. Easement is a term which is a legal term and may be something different than just solar access. So I would say solar access, existing solar access shall be protected, or something like that. Simplify it.
Is that a motion to amend, Todd?
Yes.
Okay, so so your amendment is to change Actually, could you clarify the language change that you'd like to make there?
Existing solar, just delete what it is on there, okay? And say, existing solar access is to be protected.
Okay, so
It's aspirational, I don't know.
so I've got a motion to replace item B3 in the existing language with existing solar access is to be protected. Is there a second for that motion?
I second it.
Okay, so I've got a motion and a second. For discussion, Robert, I see your hand in this.
A question of Todd. Do they allow hemlocks and alders in Southwest Coastal? Are they allowed to grow?
Yes, but if your trees grow up in somebody's view corridor, then that becomes an issue. And so I think that's the kind of thing. You could add to the protected, existing solar access is to be protected from future development or something like that. If we want to keep the trees out of it.
But you're not antagonistic to hemlocks and alders growing in their normal manner, which is vertical.
Yeah, I am. No, no, it obviously that's a problem.
Susanna?
I was wondering, the wording that we were discussing to me doesn't seem aspirational. If somebody wanted to do a project and needed permitting that would going to impinge on somebody's solar installation, that I don't see that as aspirational. And the other thing I feel about trees is that neighbors can work with each other to not let trees shade out a solar installation. I think it's good neighborship to put the wording in that they must be protected, because if you put a lot of money into solar and your neighbor plants a lot of tall growing trees that are going to grow up right over your roof, it's very problematic and creates bad neighbors. I think.
Cannon Beach used to have a tree protection ordinance, which to me was rather absurd. And I remember asking the long dead city manager how many trees he expected to exist, 20 years hence. And it was one of those unanswerables, because, not only could any insurance company refer to a tree as a danger tree, but that there was really no will to protect any trees, even though it was called a tree protection ordinance. But I'm just saying it's the same general mentality of whether it's the Kingdom by the Sea or communities immediately south thereof.
Gail.
Okay, so I just wanted to express a concern, well, maybe two concerns. The first concern is that we've gotten away from what B3 was originally looking to do, and I don't know how staff is going to go about the proposed language, how we're going to implement that, because it's going to require someone to be able to identify everybody who's got a solar easement or solar panels or that type of thing. And then that's really an issue between two property owners. It's not really an issue that the county should be involved with. I don't think. That's just from my perspective, because again, the county would not be a party to those easements. So I'm a little concerned about where we're heading with this. The second concern is that I just want to give us a time check here. We're at 4:03 right now. We're scheduled to 5 o'clock. So we've got 56 minutes. We've got I don't know what policy we're on anymore.
We're
We're on
on-
policy 2, so we got three more here, and then we've got table 2 to go through yet. So just to give you a time check.
Thanks, Gail. Any other comments on the amended language? The motion to amend to replace. Yeah.
I'd like to respond to Gail's point, and what I would say is that once the county puts out the notification to property owners, surrounding property owners, it would be up to that property owner with the solar system to look into the development. And if there was going to be an intrusion into their access to the sun, they could then come to the county and point that out. And I don't know how the county would deal with it at that point, but it does, if it was in the county intent to protect existing solar access, then the county would have an ability to say, sorry, Charlie, you can't build exactly like this. How does that sound to you as a planner, Gail?
Yeah, so I understand what you're saying, Todd, and I still have concerns about it. I also have concerns about protecting the views because there are no view easements in Southwest Coastal. So we're really imposing things onto other property owners for the benefit of people who don't own that property. Solar is a little bit different. We also have to think about we encourage, or in some places require, people not to remove trees on their property or to the very minimum extent required, but yet we're still then going to turn around and tell the next person, you're going to have to take your trees down because you're going to block my solar power, or how is that going to work? I think we're creating, especially in the southwest quadrant of the county where these issues tend to come up quite a bit and where they will be most prevalent, I think. I don't know, we're going to have a lot of conflicting uses, and I think the county's going to get drawn into a lot of private property owner right disputes, and it just gives me pause. So
Thank you, Gail. Further discussion on the proposed amended language? Okay, so let's go to a vote on this. So this vote is on replacing the language for B3 with the language existing solar access is to be protected. Existing solar access is to be protected. So I'll ask for a voice vote. Jim, how do you vote on the amendment?
Yes.
Todd, how do you vote on the amendment?
Yes.
Susanna, how do you vote on the amendment?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Ooh,
Robert, how do you vote on the amendment?
Aye.
gee.
Cheryl, how do you vote?
Yes,
So I need to figure out how
Jan,
to.
how do you vote?
No.
Okay, by a vote of 4-2, the amendment passes. Okay, so we're back to the main motion, which is to retain policy 2, but delete policy A and B1. And we have amended B3 at this point. So is there discussion at this point on the motion to retain policy 2 with the 2 deletions?
A point of order,
Yes, sir.
can a further amendment be made to delete B3?
Sure.
I move that we delete B3.
Okay, is there a second for the motion to delete B3? Any second for that motion? So it would appear that the motion to delete B3 will die for lack of a second. Okay, so back to discussion on retaining policy 2 while deleting A and B1. Is there further discussion on that motion? Okay, so let's take this to a vote. So this is a vote on retaining policy 2 while deleting A and B1. Jim Allegria, how do you vote?
Yay.
Okay, Todd Lundy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Susanna Gladwin, how do you vote?
I'm still contemplating. So we're voting on
We are voting on
what's not yellow.
No, we are voting on
in delete A, except B that's not yellow.
Not
Yes?
entirely, not entirely. So we're deleting A, we're deleting B1. Portions of that are highlighted, but certainly not all of it. So, but all of B1 would be deleted.
Okay.
So yeah, so I don't even see it on my screen, but
yes, sir.
B3 still exists. I don't see it on mine.
Correct. B2 and B3 as amended would be retained. So I'll ask again, Susanna, how would you vote on?
Can I just abstain? I'm confused. I'm fine with abstaining. Sure. Can I just abstain?
You can.
Okay.
Robert, how do you vote? Robert Strickland?
I can see on the screen, we're only talking about policy 2, the part that is now visible on our screens. That goes, the final word is achieved. Whoops. There we go. I'm just trying to get it.
So
policy 2.
Mm-hmm.
And this has nothing to do with keeping, or it does include keeping 2 and 3.
It does include it does include B2 and 3.
Okay.
So
I will vote nay.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl Johnson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, Jan Mitchell, how do you vote?
I think I abstain also.
Okay, then by a vote of 3-1, the motion passes. So the effect of that will be policy 2 is retained, policy 2A is deleted, 2B1 is deleted. Gail, I would invite you to make whatever grammatical changes you need to renumber B2 and 3. I think we probably don't even need a B anymore since we don't have a actual list at this point. You can probably just subsume the B preamble into the main preamble. Okay, so let's move on to policy 3. I'll read policy 3. Policy 3 is the county shall provide, or excuse me, getting a little wonky at this moment in the day. Policy 3, the county shall promote the application of renewable and alternative energy sources by encouraging the use of total energy systems where, for example, electricity is generated and the waste heat is utilized for space heating and cooling purposes. Staff recommendation is to retain the policy. All of the CACs supported staff recommendation. So I'll ask if there's any objection to taking from Clatsop Plains CAC the motion to support staff recommendation and retain the policy. Is there any objection to us retaining this policy? Okay, so I don't hear any objection, so we can retain policy 3. Policy 4 reads, the county shall consider energy conservation in the designation of rural lands and development lands. Staff comment is all land in the county has been placed under one of 6 designations, including rural lands or development lands. As written, this policy would continue to apply to lands where zone changes and comprehensive plan map changes are being requested. Staff recommendation is to retain the policy. All 5 CACs have supported that staff recommendation. I will take a motion to the floor from Northeast CAC to support staff recommendation and retain this policy. Is there any objection from the floor for the retention of policy 4 as written? Any objection from the floor to the retention of policy 4? Okay, so I don't hear any objection, so we can accept policy 4 for retention by unanimous consent. And we can move on to the next section, which is new policies worksheet. And we can get down to the section for the countywide CAC, which Gail hopefully has up on our screen now. One word, hydrogen. Gail, do you have background on that particular point? Is that just the battery energy storage bit?
That's, yeah, whatever Susanna was discussing at the beginning of the meeting. I just wanted, that was all I could jot down. I didn't collect her whole thought on that.
Sure. Susanna, do you have comment on this, or I'm happy to make my own comment on it too, but go ahead, Susanna.
Well, I forgot exactly the whole context, but in listing energy and looking to the future, I think hydrogen might be a big player in the future, both more promotion in vehicles, a byproduct of excess electricity through either wind or wave or whatever. Hydrogen is, in a sense, can also be considered a storage thing. So I just, I don't know how the wording would be, but hydrogen is definitely, I think, an energy resource that should be listed.
Australia has just begun major turning coal into liquid hydrogen for export to Asia. So it's a major new bit of commerce that Australia is touting, is liquid hydrogen made from coal.
And any other comments from the group on this subject, Susanna?
I would like to see then hydrogen from sources that are not contributing to climate change, that are something like that. So when you have excess electricity from wind, solar, wave, whatever, you then convert that extra electricity into hydrogen, you store the hydrogen, and then the hydrogen is there when other sources are low, then you turn to hydrogen, or you run your vehicles with it.
Jan?
But not to take an already problematic thing such as coal, and because it takes a lot of energy to convert to hydrogen, and I find that problematic.
Thanks, Susanna. Jan?
I'm just wondering if we're getting ahead of ourselves on technology. I mean, I've read articles recently too, but I'm not at all sure that the technology is developed to the extent that we can write policy on them yet. That's just my concern.
Jim?
Well, I'd like to see something a little more generic, like non-polluting sources or something like that. So we're not really excluding anything in the future that may develop. But as long as I believe the gist of our objective here is to encourage non-polluting sources of energy, regardless of where they come from. So I would like to leave it to staff to think about that, see if that's a better fit for wording, and instead of discussing every single potential source.
I agree.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I think Gail, for my 2 cents, I was interested in including this mostly because I don't know if this is the right section of the comp plan to even handle this, but as an area of commerce and energy infrastructure, I think as we move to more renewable, less baseline consistent energy sources, that storage is an issue, and I'd like to see the comp plan reflect a desire by the county to incentivize, encourage, whatever, storage of renewable energy as an asset to the county.
Just a scrivener's on including.
Yeah, that can work. So, and like I said earlier, I don't know if that where that's best handled, if that's economic development or a resource issue. I honestly don't know, or if that goes in the new climate change section when that comes around. But any other discussion on this particular item? Okay, let's ask about Susanna.
Well, I would prefer Jim saying rather than more open-ended, definitely to have it that won't affect increased climate change. Storage can go, who knows what's happening with storage. Or it also means dams which store water and all that stuff. So I find that wording problematic.
Okay, fair enough. So we've got this item. Is there any comment or objection from the group for the county contacting the Oregon Department of Energy to try and get wind generation sites and assessment? Any further commentary on that item?
No, just that I believe we support it.
Yeah, I think so too. So for what was that? Is it goal? I'm sorry, I don't know my goals well enough off the top of my head. So it's goal 1, citizen involvement, to integrate Native American entities in the county when public notice is required. Any other commentary from the group to flesh that out, or thoughts on that? Okay, so again, I'd say that there seemed to be general agreement at the time that was a good idea. And then Todd or anyone, do you have commentary? Well, do we still need this item, or was the amendment that we made to include some of this language sufficient for compostable, recyclable consumables? Is this still necessary given the language that we did include in the policy?
No, I think we've covered it.
Okay, is there any objection from the group for us just taking this one off, so that, and depending on the policy that we worked through earlier? Okay, not hearing any. Gail, I think you can probably take that particular one off. And then we have this this item from the LC Jewel area that they need more local commercial, medical, and cultural opportunities. Comment, Jan.
This is the old city planner in me talking. I think Oregon's policies direct urban services to urban areas, and that's part of the choice you make when you live in a rural area. You're opting to have, excuse me, I have a puppy in here playing with a cat. You make those choices, and you don't have the same level of services, and you don't have commercial operations because there isn't enough base to support it, and because in the state of Oregon, the policy says those kinds of things need to be in cities, and so I think it's unfortunate, and I will shut up so my puppy shuts up.
Okay, so Susanna, I see your hand.
Well, the county is a big donut of population with where my area is a very thin side of the donut, but and the whole center is forestry, and I don't know how many hundreds of people live on the outer ring of the donut, and I think it's problematic to say we live out here because of that. And if there's a commercial operation out here, of which there are many, they're there because they get fun, there is a need for them, whether it's logging or the restaurants or whatever. I don't see the need for commercial opportunities out here, but the need for medical and perhaps cultural opportunities, I definitely want to see be included. And under medical, things like, drug rehab programs, some outreach, if nothing else, down to Seaside, which is much more accessible for Jewel because there's, it takes half the time on a bus, or people shop that way and you can get a ride. But I want to speak.
Susanna, is the Jewel Saloon gone? It was both cultural and whatever. Is it long gone?
Yes. Long gone. And there have been cultural opportunities at the school, and there is a facility there. And I think it's important to have more support out here. This county is so Astoria centric. So anybody who's in 20 minutes of Astoria doesn't feel it. But I mean, even to be given an ankle bracelet out here in Jewel, which means you've got to drive in and do all these diversion programs and all these things, which there's so many ways of which it's very difficult living out here. And I know people choose to, and some of it is also cost of housing. There is probably quite a bit of poverty here and very low income people, but it's an ability for them to be able to live and have some kind of a roof over their head.
Gail, I can see you've brought a map up, or did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, so I just wanted to point out that there is a commercial area that's already zoned in the Jewel area. It's along 202 and the east side of 103, just north of the Jewel School. But when you look at it, there's really nothing that's there. It's pretty much vacant property. So there are opportunities out there. It's just a matter of how do we encourage the right uses to get there to serve the population.
Thank you, Gail.
And by the way, I believe that that piece is just north of the intersection of 202 and 103. Gail? The map you put up there?
Yes, yeah. So there's a piece that's north of 202. There's a strip south of 202 that wraps around where the intersection of 103 and 202 is.
Oh, I see the red area. I
Right.
think some of that was all about pot marijuana stuff.
Cheryl, I see your hand. Cheryl?
Yeah, I would just like to address this. I am in a very, very rural area. From my house to the center of Astoria, I budget 30 minutes always. If I'm behind the Tillamook milk truck, then I need to budget 40 or 45 minutes. My expectation is that I have to drive to the city for medical and cultural opportunities, and I do not expect them to be in the rural area. In Napa, there is a small section that is zoned commercial, so that opportunity does exist. I'm going to do a time check for us. We are at 4:30, although nobody asked for it. And I'm ready to move back to the beginning of this table 2. And there's a staff recommendation that I would like to look at. And then I think as much time as we have, we will go over the other ones. I'm ready to move on.
Any other discussion on the central group recommendations? We haven't always even covered the CAC recommendations, but certainly if there are things that people want to pick out, and we've got time to do that, we can go for it. So Cheryl, you wanted to discuss the staff recommendation though?
I just thought that, yeah, that we should look at it and talk about it. If you want to go ahead and read it.
Sure. So the proposed draft language from staff is that Clatsop County shall require new development projects, specifically subdivisions and commercial developments, and/or projects in rural communities to incorporate bus stops, walking paths, and/or biking paths whenever possible. So is there discussion or recommendations on that language from staff? Cheryl?
This concept of rural, I think it sort of folds into what Suzanne was talking about. Access to good bus systems is a definite discussion topic ongoing in Northeast. So we support this recommendation to include bus stops, etc. And they were very interested in biking paths too, whenever possible. So Northeast strongly supports this staff recommendation.
I second it if that's what's necessary.
I don't know that it's strictly necessary, but I'm sure staff would appreciate support for their policy. Robert?
Always vigilant for equestrian being added to the string of bicycles and pedestrians.
And that recommendation came out of the Clatsop Plains CAC, and it's reflected on your table.
Thanks, Gil. Are there any other items or further discussion on that particular point? Any other items within the new policies out of the CACs that folks would like to talk about?
I'm a little lost by what I see on the screen, and
so in our packet there is a section that Gail's throwing the end of anyway, of new policy recommendations, many of which came out of the CACs, either about general language or sometimes about their particular section. So I guess this is just an opportunity. If there were things out of that people wanted to particularly bring up, we don't usually go through them point by point just because it's it takes a lot of time to do that. And a lot of them are either specific to the CACs or they're generalizable enough that and acceptable enough that we don't need to cover them. But if people want to talk about any of them, we certainly can.
The screen that we just had, where I blurted about adding equestrian to bicycle and pedestrian, and and bus stop, can that come back down?
Sure, that was the first one. Sure.
Visible.
Yep. And then I saw a hand from Cheryl, and then maybe one from Susanna. Cheryl.
Yeah.
Were we going to talk about Roberts, or did you want me to go ahead?
No, no need to. It's solved.
Okay. Under Northeast, there are a couple of those, but I'll just talk about one and then give other people a chance. And if we have leftover time, we'll come back. 1, 2, 3. Fourth one down under Northeast, how to balance solar and conversion of limited agricultural land in the county. And at the recommendation of my neighbor, Ed Johnson, who has served on these kinds of committees in the past and is a functioning farmer in Clatsop County, sent an article to me, and I sent it to my Northeast CAC, and I think it got sent out to all of you, but I don't remember. And it was about the concept of combining sheep grazing and solar panels. And so there was discussion in the Northeast CAC on that. And what we wrote here is to incentivize the installation of solar panels through low interest loans or tax abatement exemption programs. The county recognizes that there are limited agricultural lands within the county, and that is important to us, but there is also a need to balance that limitation with the need for renewable, sustainable energy sources. To achieve that balance, the county shall encourage the use of small-scale solar installations, 5 acres or less, that integrate grazing and other agricultural practices with solar installation. So we had an in-depth discussion on this. Gail helped us with the wording on this. And if there was support from the other CACs to include this, that would be great. We did discuss this 5 acres or less. There was discussion about having more than 5 acres, but we have to balance it with that need to always retain the agricultural land whenever possible.
I don't think those two conflict, your solar panels and your sheep. Whether you had 10 acres or 5 acres, as long as you continue to graze under the solar panels, there's no conflict, and it's a desirable, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, agroforestry center to do such things. And I think it'd be great. So go ahead, Johnson.
Yeah, I do too. I think I support this as a policy. Is that what we're trying to do, is to elevate these ideas to policy status? Andy?
So my understanding generally on this table is that so Northeast CAC has already made a recommendation, which in some sense staff has already accepted, right? Like that it makes this table because staff is considering it, and in most cases is going to put language together to put in the comp plan, is my understanding, either for that group, for that Northeast CAC, or possibly for the larger county comprehensive plan. So I don't know that we need to take action on this. I think staff is already moving on it. If you want to,
there implies a conflict, and I don't believe there is a conflict here. It's how to balance one and the other, as if they're competing for one another. And the sheep are happy to have solar panels above their grazing area. You know, the two, you know, you're not pitting one against the other. And this sort of implies that that's what's happening.
I think this is saying explicitly that there are instances like the grazing and solar panel installation that work together and don't take land out of the agricultural zone or agricultural use. But procedurally, before we continue discussion on this, procedurally, Gail, am I correct in my understanding of how staff is looking at these tables?
Yeah, I think that's generally correct, Andy. And what this table is intended for is it's a place to brainstorm. It's not a place to go back and wordsmith everybody's idea of what might happen or what we need to address in the next 20 years, but it's just a place where the committees can brainstorm their ideas. And I'd like to see this committee focus more on the brainstorming part of it, a little bit less on the wordsmithing of the existing policies. But that's just my preference. So, but yeah, we're not voting anything up or down at this point. It's just put your ideas on paper.
Okay, can we throw in support the you know, the co-activities somehow? Yeah, you're the wordsmith, oh doyen of development. And I certainly will support any wordsmithing you do to show that they're mutually compatible.
I don't think there's any wordsmithing that's required. All it is just a place to put down, the Northeast is putting down their ideas. I don't think that this committee really needs to weigh in on the Northeast ideas. I would like this committee to come up with their own ideas and talk about the things that they're concerned about that haven't been addressed, that no committee has thought about yet.
Thanks. Thank you, Gail. Cheryl, I see your hand.
Okay, so I just want to clarify. So what we have here is 3 pages of suggestions from each of the different local groups. And I guess I sort of view this as our wish list. These are things that we discussed and that we, within our small group, think are important and are putting forward, but the other groups wouldn't necessarily have seen them or agreed to them. But if you're saying that indeed this is sort of a loose working list for the county, then that's great. I sort of saw it as a wish list, and maybe if there were things that, I mean, there are a number of things I have marks on here for the other groups, things that the Northeast supports and that I'm willing to speak to that came out of their groups. So yeah, I just need to be clear whether this is a working list or whether this is a wish list. Thanks.
I'm not sure I understand your distinction, but I mean, you'll notice that a lot of the committees, they know that there is an issue that they want addressed, but they did not necessarily come up with the policy language. The only reason I've included what the other groups have looked at and put on this list is that, you know, if something's already been addressed and you've seen it and you're fine with it, there's no need for this committee to readdress it and bring it back up necessarily. I'm just trying to expose you to what everybody else has seen as possible issues or concerns that should be addressed in the comprehensive plan, or that they have identified that they think need to be addressed in the comprehensive plan. If it's easier, I can strip all those out. If the consensus of this committee is that you really want to spend time going item by item through each one of these and wordsmith and prepare the policies, I really don't support that. But if that is the consensus, that is what you want to do.
Would it help if we gave smiley faces or frowny faces?
So,
would it help if we gave smiley faces and frowny faces?
Why is it so difficult to just look at this and say, and maybe it's because I haven't carried my headers over, and so maybe it's confusing. But really, what we're looking at are issues to be addressed, and then if you've got some proposed language that you want to include as a policy, then that's it. But we need, the whole point of the comprehensive plan is that we're supposed to be looking forward for the next 20 years. We are spending an inordinate amount of time looking back at why, or was there a conservation service, or why did this happen? And I understand why is important, but I want to reiterate, we're planning for the next 20 years, not dissecting or bisecting or anything, any type of secting what happened 40 years ago to parse out that language. And that what I just said did not make any sense, but in my head it makes sense. So can we just focus on the next 20 years, please?
So Gail, I think
Well, I have a question. Gail, these are proposals, or are they proposals? They're just ideas. And how do they get from this to the other side of the line and become policies and then get approval by committees? How does that work?
So what the way I envision it is that we're as staff are going to take this list of brainstormed ideas. Some of them are more fully fleshed out than others, as you'll see from the table. A lot of times some committees will just say, okay, staff, this is what we want to address, you go figure out the language. But when the draft goals are rewritten, then that's when these would get incorporated in as new policies. And then when those go back to the committees, then that would be your time to say yay or nay or wordsmith it more. I think that as we move forward in this process, we really, as staff, are putting together a bit more stringent schedule, and I think we're going to be making some procedural changes to how we're operating. But that will be a discussion for another day. But anyway, so really, I guess at this point, you know how I feel about this table. You as the countywide committee need to tell me what you want to do with this table if you're not in agreement.
is there feedback from the group on that, Jim?
I actually like having all of these. I think they should remain within the CACs as designated, but having them there may be a few that other areas say, hey, wait a minute, this shouldn't just be Northeast or Clatsop Plains. This should be countywide. So it provides an opportunity to look at that and maybe pull some of those out for these broader discussions. So I like having them in there. But we don't have to but I don't think we need to talk about them item by item by item.
Thanks, Jim. Any other feedback from the group about the table or how we should be using it? Todd?
No, I just agree. I agree with Andy on that, or on that. But it seems to me that it needs to, they are inspirational, and they may lead to other thoughts. And so along with what Gail is saying, it would be probably good for us to be able to peruse the whole list and perhaps come up with ideas. I know we were supposed to do that, but I don't think we understood that when we first got them. Maybe we should table this and give us all an opportunity to go through all these lists and make proposals regarding expanding them or bringing them to slightly changing them, or just making more.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just going to interrupt for a moment. So when we send our agenda emails out, they're highlighted in yellow at the bottom of every email are suggested directions about how to prepare for our meetings. One of them is identify new issues and trends that should be addressed in the comprehensive plan over the next 20 years. And it's on your agenda as well. So I think that staff has tried to be very clear I don't know how to make it more clear that what we're doing is trying to identify new issues or trends that we should be considering over the next 20 years. So I'm just going to stop there. So yeah, so we have tried to make it clear that that is what this table is for, to identify new issues. We have never asked you to go through and comment or critique or reword anybody else's issues. This is a place to identify new issues and trends.
Cheryl, Jan, and then Susanna.
I agree that I don't think it's a good use of our time to go through these item by item. And I absolutely agree that we should not spend time wordsmithing them. We spend a lot of time wordsmithing in this group, and it's not my favorite activity. But just to go ahead and speak on the record and to be perfectly clear, I think that Gail does understand where we're going and what we're doing and what the values of our various communities are. To be perfectly honest, the final process for this is years down the road, and Gail may or may not be here then. And quite honestly, my concern is, and that we'll just use the sheep and the solar grazing as an example. This is not a big deal for me. I think it's fine, but it's a little example. If when I go to the Planning Commission and I don't see that in there, and I say, hey, we talked about that, and Gail is gone, or things have changed, and they say, we don't have a written policy on that. Nobody wrote it up. And I say, well, we talked about it. It was on a sheet one time. We thought they were going to scoop it up. So I'm always concerned with process. I trust and respect Gail. Gail may not be here at the end of the process. It's going to go through many, many hands before it's done. So I'm just insecure that we wrote a wish list and it may drift off and not come around again. Thank you.
Jan, then Susanna.
I was just wondering if it would be appropriate, we've got the list, for us individually to go through and let Gail know if there are 2 or 3 of those that we think we would like to take a stab at writing policies so they get in there. If that's a way to get out of the circular stuff we're into, where we go over and over in huge detail, and I get frustrated too. Would it be useful for this group to take some initiative themselves, or does that just muddy it up more?
Susanna.
Well, this is just a little techno thing for me. By the end of the meeting, I'm tired, and these discussions that come from, I mean, these little points from all the different committees show up here, but it's been very confusing when one sits there for a long time, another one comes up, and they go back and forth, and I can't access my thing off my computer because my computer's doing this. Just somehow or another, where when I'm tired, it's the end of the meeting, where I get a better sense of where we all are at in our different discussions from our community plans, just to work that out better. Does that make sense to you, what I just said?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Okay, so we need to give a little space here for both public comment and for procedural things for us, and we've only got a few minutes left. So let me ask, well, let's see, there's nobody we've scared all the members of the public off at this point. So we've solved that problem. Gail, are there administrative things that we need to talk about before we adjourn today?
The only administrative thing is that staff will be giving an update to the board on April 20th at a work session about the status of our, not our committee here, but the entire comprehensive plan update process. Otherwise, that's it. I'm intrigued why Cheryl thinks I'm going to be gone before this process is ended, but that's a side conversation. So.
Are there
Frustration.
any wrap-up thoughts or comments from the group before we adjourn today?
I think Gail will be getting a lot of
Just wondering-
job offers, doing such a great job.
Yes. So Gail, April 20th is the county commission meeting where there will be the presentation. Is that what you said?
Yep, that's correct. And that's going to
It's a county commission meeting.
Yeah, it's a 10 o'clock meeting, work session.
Thank you, Gail.
So not a usual, but a special?
I'm sorry, not a usual
Kind of a
what?
special work session?
Yeah, they've added
meeting,
a whole bunch of work sessions to their agendas because they have so much to talk about. And so the April 20th is a new recurring work session. It's at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
Cheryl?
Thank you.
I started, oops, yeah, okay. I started to type in, thanks everyone. It was a positive and productive meeting today. I always like it when we end on time. I always like it when we get through the whole agenda. And Gail, I'm scared to death that you're going to leave us.
Oh my God, you guys are so
get,
stuck with me. You're so stuck with me.
That you're going to get frustrated and you're going to say, I don't need this. I don't want this. I'm out of here. So that's where I'm coming from. If you are here from now until the end, then I'm fine and safe and secure. But if you're gone, that institutional history of how we got where we got goes with it.
No, I'm not going anywhere.
Oh, good.
Any other comments from the group? Closing thoughts? If not, thank you all.
I so appreciate Gail.
No, and thank you all. I know I get frustrated and I'm sorry, but so anyway, you guys are wonderful. So thank you. And I appreciate your time. Except Mr. Strickland, he's very special.
Sometimes he's too special.
No. All right. Thank you all for your time today and your hard work on all of this. We'll see you again next month for our next session. Thanks, Gail.